Good morning. Mark Shepard is a farmer taking the basic lessons of permaculture and adding them to create a new vision for the family farm. The lessons you'll learn today are all real, not theory, and are in place on Mark's Wisconsin farm. He's the author of the new book, Restoration Agriculture, which is being unveiled at this conference today. Please welcome Mark Shepard.
Yay! I think that was one of the finest canned introductions I've ever heard. Nice job. Thank you very much. Is that too loud? It's kind of almost too loud for me. Does we have a sound guy at all? Okay, it's good for you? All right, that's fine. If it's good for you, it's good for me. But I have a dynamic range, so just look out. And if whoever that person is, if they can get the AC going in here, we're about to combust. At least I am. So it doesn't happen too soon. I'm not going to introduce myself too long. I'm just going to do a short and a short and a short. I grew up on what was the vestiges of a family farm in north central Massachusetts that had been whittled away and whittled away and whittled away, and then it turned into what would be qualified nowadays as like a farmette or hobby farm, 10 or 15 acres or whatever. But we were surrounded by industrial wasteland. And if anybody is familiar with Milwaukee or Cleveland or some kind of these river cities, we're right down by the river at the bottom of the hill where I grew up would flow different colors every day. I forget how old I was. When did the Cuyahoga River catch on fire in Ohio? It's like 73, so I've been like 11, 10. And it made the news and it caught on fire. I'm like, Mom, why did that make the news? Our river catches on fire like a couple times a week. What's the big deal? Isn't that what rivers do? So my mom was a displaced Vermont dairy girl. My dad was a displaced Maine woodsman. Their parents both lost their livelihood during the Great Depression and World War II. And my grandparents sought work in the industrial promised land of north central Massachusetts. And all of my family stories while growing up was like these sad stories of how we lost the farm, how we used to live in paradise, and on and on and on. And so I really, really, really wanted to get the heck out. And I didn't know how to get out. We didn't have any financial resources, no inheritance, all that kind of stuff. And so I kicked, scratched, clawed, figured, and fought my way out of this mess. And I ended up in this mess over here. Might as well get rolling here. I'll call it work in capital W, is really based on I'm standing on a whole bunch of shoulders of a lot of giants. There's a new, impulse going on in agriculture and in living these days. Some of it is real, and some of it is feel good. Some of the giants and some of the methodologies and techniques that really resonate with me that I am of the opinion that actually are onto something. I'm just going to show right here. And one is like this Regen 10, Darren Doherty and his crowd out of Australia, all about regenerative agriculture that regenerates the soil, replenishes groundwater, purifies water, that sort of stuff. There's a whole holistic management technique, technology, decision-making process. I treat it mostly as a decision-making process and not necessarily a cookie cutter or a recipe approach. Do this, do that, do the other thing. The one that kind of really tickled me at first was the whole permaculture design. So I kind of consider my work as coming out of and based on permaculture, but I draw on all of this stuff for guidance and ideas, and especially keyline design. If you saw that first slide, you'll see that again. That was an aerial photograph of my farm. It's you again. I got to talk to you later. All right. Our farm was designed according to the keyline plan for water management. We'll talk a little bit about that later. You'll see the patterns obviously were very different. They're linear, but they were not square or rectilinear. There's a whole Zero Emissions Research Institute, and I'm just going to state this as a matter of fact. We can design our homes, our farms, our businesses to be zero emissions. We can design our homes, businesses to be positive net energy contributors while being environmental benefits. We're producing ecosystem services in addition to being zero emissions. It's called a design issue. You just design it that way. Design it that way from the start. If you design for anything less than paradise, guess what? That's what you'll get. That's what you'll get. There's also the whole micro-integration thing. Wow, what's going on below the soil and in a decomposition process? Farming has mostly been thought of as part of like the growth process. We're in this growth process and we harvest yields from the growth process. We can also harvest yields from the decay process. These things, incredible also for mitigating pollution. They can get rid of this nasty stuff that's up in the atmosphere. When they cracked open a 3 Mile Island containment vessel after it had the near meltdown, when was that, 70s or 80s or whatever it was, they found fungus growing on the control rods. And that's awesome. That is awesome. So there's no worries here. We've got all the tools. Wet systems, living machines, John Todd, that sort of thing. How do we deal with our effluent, our liquid effluent, no matter what kind of liquid effluent it might be? There are biological systems in place that are regenerative that we use every step of the way. Of course, the carbon farming thing, I oftentimes talk quite a bit about carbon. If I don't this time, it's always in the background of what I'm talking about. Everything that I'm talking about today is all carbon sequestering. We don't have to go out of our way to do practices that will sequester carbon, because with restoration agriculture, we are a carbon sequestering technology. That's just what we do. That's what our farm does. And then the whole transition towns network, I think it's real promising. These are more on the urban scale. These are more systems, community-based, not necessarily biology on the ground, but the whole process of how do we transition from the current blip in human history of having abundant fossil fuels to when we don't necessarily have abundant fossil fuels, or the blip from when we have abundant fossil fuels to when we are living in an amazingly toxified environment with still having plenty of fossil fuels, but even more toxic than we are now. And yeah, we'll talk about that later. Now, permaculture. My permaculture diploma is from Bill Mollison, this guy in Australia who invented the word. The original word that he coined it for meant permanent agriculture. I thought that was really cool. Like I said, I grew up on a hobby farm. I went to school first for mechanical engineering. I failed to enjoy that. I got a job right out of college and failed to enjoy that even more. So I quit my job and I went back to school for ecology. I'm going to be like Steve Irwin, you know, crocodile, totally dangerous, mate. And I found myself after my ecology studies in the laboratory with a white lab coat, goggles, and a fume hood, looking at bugs that came out of formaldehyde, doing species assessments for environmental impact statements. So what we do is this, you know, mega destructive corporation is going to come in and fill in a swamp. So we go out there and we count bugs that we store in formaldehyde and say, oh yeah, there's all these bugs, and then go build a shopping mall anyways. It's like, well, how am I helping things here? Then I heard this a video called The Global Gardener by Bill Mollison. It was an Australia PBS kind of show. I forget when it was, like in the 80s or something. And I heard him say in Australian, it says like, the aim is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. He said profitable in the video, which provide for their own needs, don't exploit, don't pollute, and are sustainable in the long term. I said, bingo, there's the home run right there. We're going to have a permanent agriculture. We're going to get our staple food crops from permanent ecological systems, not from fields. We're going to get them from permanent ecological systems, and we're going to design it that way. We're going to design it that way to be perennial, energy net positive, and ecologically sound and economically profitable. That's a home run. So that's been my like quote unquote work ever since then. This is the book. I actually have a first edition copy of the Permaculture Designer's Manual. This is on the board here, this rainbow serpent thing. That's what the new cover looks like, or the current cover looks like. This was the original first version, and it's one of the books that I've read more than any other book around. As you can see, there's coffee on half the pages. This was so long ago that all of the organizations and institutions that had anything to do with permaculture are listed in the back, names, addresses, and phone numbers. If you were to do that today, there are millions and millions and millions of people worldwide that have had permaculture training. So you couldn't possibly keep them in a book. Yeah, can you imagine that? We used to keep track of people's phone numbers on paper. That's really amazing. Not too long ago. What I liked about permaculture is that it was based on like a triumvirate of ethics. Earth care, people care, and some sort of equitable distribution of our economic activity. You know, whatever we do, if we're growing food, or if we're making products, or if we're helping somebody, you know, cleaning their house, whatever it is, but when human beings interact and do some kind of work, that product is some sort of economic activity. So with that, we should have some kind of fair way to distribute things. and it kind of works all together. It's like the cart before the horse before the cart before the horse before the, and if you don't take care of the earth, it's not going to take care of the people. If we don't take care of the people, we won't be able to take care of the earth. And if we're not fair about how we distribute our goods and services to one another and amongst one another, people get disgruntled. How do you like that for a word? And when people get disgruntled, horrible things happen in this world. Just look around, right? There's a lot of disgruntlement or disgrunt going on. And then this basic ethic is unfolded onto the landscape through a huge list of principles. The first book that came out, David Holmgren was Bill Mollison's sidekick when they wrote the first permaculture books. Then David Holmgren's first book was basically Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability. It's all these list of principles, it's permaculture principles. And so what we try to do is we try to implement our ethic using a set of principles, and we design these ecosystems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. Well, then, of course, I do this for a period of years. When I first started doing permaculture a long time ago, nobody even heard of it. Anybody ever heard of permaculture before? I could go to a workshop not too long ago, say permaculture, and there was like 3 people in a room this big that would know, even heard of it. And now what's happened, like I said, millions of people worldwide have had permaculture. Who's taken a permaculture design course? Look at that. Oh my goodness, holy cow. Why then, if we're doing permaculture on the farm scale, would I ever want to have to do a farm scale permaculture? Isn't it just permanent agriculture? It's permaculture. Well, in any kind of new meme, I hate that word, any kind of new idea or thing that starts moving through the culture, as it changes, the first adopters that come on, they bring all of their own personal opinions and viewpoints of the world with them. They take whatever they learn, and then what they've learned, they unfold it with their own stuff embedded into it. I'm no different. I've taken permaculture with what I learned, who I was and where I came from, and have unfolded it this way. Well, this is not the way that the majority of permaculture has unfolded it. It's, in the US especially, it's become all about urban, suburban, and cute little things to do. Instead of being seen as this wide-reaching design methodology, it's become a mud oven, an herb spiral, and these little disconnected things. It's like saying, yeah, we're going to change the light bulbs, and go, I've changed the world, all is well. But that's not my interpretation of permaculture. For me, permaculture design is a redesign of absolutely everything. Did you catch that yet? Absolutely everything to be ecologically sound, number one. And then the economically profitable, we might find out that, guess what? We're having some challenges there. We might have to rethink our opinions of what the economy is. I'm not about to change the world global economy and all that kind of stuff. I can change what I do. The economically profitable thing is elusive for every single one of us out here. And it's not our fault. Okay, it's not our fault. So back to, why restoration agriculture? This is what permaculture has become. And don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing this. This is essential. One of the things that drove me to doing restoration agriculture was once I had gotten my initial training, I started teaching as a guest teacher at different permaculture courses. I'd go in and do like a 3-hour thing on trees or soils because got the ecology background and all that kind of stuff. And over again, I'd hear this thing, well, with permaculture, we won't need farms. We make all this food in our front yard. There's so much food, it'll just falling off the trees. You'll have to wear a helmet so you don't get hurt. And then we'd sit down and we'd eat rice and beans. Or falafel and hummus. And say, but this is organic. This is organic. Well, I've seen organic rice fields in California, about 6,000 acres, certified organic. Every year they have to destroy the ecosystem there, the soil food web that's there in order to scatter those few little rice seeds on the ground to get those 6,000 acres. They got riparian buffers and habitat islands. They're doing organic as well as anybody that I know of. But that really stuck in I don't have a gizzard or a craw, but it upset me. So at one particular course, when I'd heard it one last time, this particular instructor, who's like the lead instructor, got real snotty. And said, well, of course we won't need farms. We don't need farms. Excuse me, folks. You can have a 100% permacultured yard right now, today, and we need to, because this is our source, our most concentrated source of the most fresh, nutrient-dense, vitamins and minerals that we can possibly get. There is no produce that is better for you and fresher, and there's no easier, more cost-effective way to get it than right in your front yard. But if these people in both cases sit down to eat their landscape, because with permaculture we won't need farms, they will starve. They do not have enough calories, they do not have enough proteins, they do not have enough oils. They need their staple food crops. Every single one of these people go home and they eat their like I said, their rice and beans, their pasta, their bread. And then a lot of what I was saying earlier, how the permaculture movement has gotten so divorced from like reality. It's all about blogging about it and talking about it and, you know, feeling good and let's have a get together and throw some mud in a pile. The rain barrel. Catching your water off the roof is a great idea. It's a brilliant idea. Why don't more people do it? However, a 10-foot by 10-foot square in a 1-inch rain will generate 62 gallons of water. The rain barrel is an exercise in design failure. When it rains on a 40 by 40 house and puts out 875 gallons, your rain barrel overflows and it floods your cellar. So you got to get a sump pump to pump the cellar out. Damn rain barrel doesn't work. 3 weeks go by, you don't get a lick of rain. You got to go out in your permaculture garden. It's starting to suffer. All this newspaper with like toxic cadmium ink that you brought in as mulch is starting to dry up and blow away. So you need water. You only have 25 gallons left because it's evaporated. You get 25 gallons, you water 15 tomato plants. It fails again. It needs to be based on reality. How much roof surface area do we have to collect? How much rain falls? How much do we want to store over what period of time? We don't need rain barrels, we need swimming pools. All right? That's the volume of water that we actually can catch off of roofs and actually use. That's real design versus this play design. So if you have rain barrels, I'm not dissing what you're doing, get real, okay? Get real. Really design your ecosystem based on the realities of this planet. I don't know if you guys have ever had Sandor cats in your audience before, but when this guy sits there and looks at you, it's like, man, it's like, where can I hide? And what's even worse is Gary Zimmer, because it's just a grin. This grin is like, and he never asks a question, he never says anything, he just sits there and grins, this little high vibrational frequency kind of whatever. So all of these people here, they go home and they eat their staple food crops. Their carbohydrates, proteins, and oil come from the most destructive technology ever invented by humanity, period. This is a soybean field. Yes, it happens to be a genetically modified soybean field. I am standing, however, right in front of a plaque looking out over this area here. Let's see. I'll pick on this lady right here. You look old enough to remember the Jefferson administration, don't you? Absolutely. During the Jefferson administration, before the Louisiana Purchase, they took a bunch of like surveyors, you know, young guys in their teens and 20s or whatever, and they say, okay, go west in a straight line, carry this big long steel measuring chain. Every 6 miles, stop and record what you see. This is somewhere in east central, southeastern Ohio. And the team reported that they had just come out of old growth forest. Out of these hills, the old growth forest, it was American chestnut, 8 and 10 foot diameter, so close together that they had a hard time getting their horses through. Well, as an understory weed, underneath these giant American chestnuts were sugar maple with 3 and 4 foot diameter trunks that had no branches, 60 feet up into the air. Can you imagine sugar maple, the biggest sugar maple you've ever seen as an understory shrub? You know, amazing. Well, then they come out into this opening, and they went like, oh my goodness. There were scattered like 3 to 5 gigantic oak trees per acre in this opening. And they were the list of animal species was a who's who of, you know, wild kingdom North America. Mountain lions hanging out in the trees, just lazy, with like deer and birds dripping from the branches because they got so much to eat, you know, that none of the other animals are afraid. There was bison, grizzly bear, and brown bear east of the Mississippi, grizzly bear, elk, and birds, ground birds in huge flocks. And one of the things that was most noticeable was that the grasses in this grassland that they went through were over the heads of their horses. Now, I'm sure these people were not hobbits, and they weren't riding on little ponies, okay? These were like probably real human beings riding on real full-size horses that came out of this old-growth primeval forest into these openings, and they really did see this. And that was some of the allure that brought people down the Ohio River Valley to come to these incredibly abundant, you know, fertile heartland of America in the Midwest. So as soon as they show up, of course, instead of realizing that this is one of the most abundant producing systems in the world, they come with their ideas. They come with their ideas, well, now we're going to farm it. So we got to cut everything down, push everything in a pile, burn it, chop it, build out of it, then plow up the ground, oxidize all the organic matter, and plant a couple of hard seeds. Oh, but geesh, we're trying to grow corn, and in April when we're supposed to plant corn, it's too wet, so we better dig a ditch to drain all the water away. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. So, yeah, don't get me started until we go all the way back. I've got to talk about a few things here. There's basically three ways that human beings have been able to derive a livelihood on this planet over its entire history. And the first way was as hunter-gatherers. It's the first that the archaeological record shows us that people did is they kind of wandered around in the natural environment the way it was. They went from place to place wherever the material resources were the most abundant. They'd have campsites that would last longer. They got to be semi-nomadic because they go from like where the animals were in the summertime or where fish were in the summertime to a good winter hunting territories back and forth. So they kind of moved around wherever the resources were the most abundant. They didn't destroy their resource base wholesale broad scale. Well, then the second kind of, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle has always been successful. And it's still successful today. There are cultures, hunter-gatherer cultures, that are as old as humanity is, and they keep getting pushed further and further and further back. Their habitat is getting, diminished. Well, the second most sustainable human culture ever were the pastoralist nomads. These were the folks that kind of had some animals that started to follow them around, or that they actually grabbed and domesticated. Nobody really knows how that happened. And they would wander around with their herds in their environment, picking the fruits and the nuts and the berries, going from place to place. They were also semi-nomadic. That lifestyle is still sustainable today. There are cultures all across the world that are still semi-nomadic, pastoralist nomads. Then somewhere around 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, depending on whose books you're reading, a couple of things happened all at once, give or take 1,000 years. There was the end of the Ice Age. All that ice had been melting. Is no longer running through these systems. There was a general warming, a drying. The megafauna, if you guys seen like those National Geographic fold-outs of like these, three-headed rhinos and the 45-foot tall ground sloths and, all these different kinds of animals, weird-looking camel things running all over the place. Those creatures, in most places, went extinct within about 1,000 years of each other. Why? Scientists debate about this. It was part of it, yeah. Well, because factually we can look at the global climate has been warming for the past 35,000 years. It just has. Was that the cause or one of the factors? That's why scientists actually get paid, is because they don't do real work. Excuse me. Some other things happen at the same time. So all of a sudden, for some reason, nobody really knows, across the globe at about the same time, people started to settle down and stay in one place year-round instead of moving where the resources went. Where they settled down year-round were the richest, most fertile, abundant places around. It had access to water, which was your transportation corridors, and extra water for irrigating crops. As a matter of fact, it was the first time that crops were actually grown intentionally. It was the beginning of when there was a division. Instead of egalitarian societies, kind of like the tribe organization, went to a linear top-down organization with priests or kings or merchants, or there was a beginning of the warrior class. It was kind of beginning when there's things like head binding and foot binding in infants, ritual genital mutilation, and the first time when all of a sudden there's fossil evidence that this group of people here intentionally picked themselves up, went over here, and killed those people over there and took all their stuff and enslaved the ones that didn't get killed, and then stole and inbred with the females that they thought were desirable and used the other females as sex toys. This is when all this stuff got started at the same time. And all of those things had one thing in common. And this is the thing that's been bugging me for a long period of time. They all had this one thing in common. It's called annual agriculture. Up to that point, there hadn't been a regular annual agriculture. There was annual crops that were being grown, but not necessarily in fields that you would plow with slaves, of course. or enslaved animals for beasts of burden. They were just like a patch of grains here, a patch of grains there. Who knows what the primary uses for teosinte, which is the ancestor of corn, emmer, barley, and rice. What was the first uses of those crops? The stems were used when they were green as a little chewy thing for the kids because it's sweet, and then the grains were used for fermenting into alcohol. And so these are, the first use was to make alcohol. Now imagine you're a hunter-gatherer society. All this megafauna is extinct. Hunter-gatherers have this top-down linear hierarchy. If I'm the biggest, baddest baboon in the tribe, and I have the most experience in sticking mammoths with a sharp, pointy little stick, when we go out after this one mammoth, the whole entire tribe and village depends on us guys getting it right. And since I got the experience, I'm the boss, you listen to me, and when I say jump, everybody just jumps unquestioningly. This top-down patriarchal decision-making process was perfectly adapted to hunting mastodon with a pointy stick. When all of a sudden there's no more mastodon and you know, Irish elk and dire wolf to kill, we're unemployed. So what do? We want to go back and watch Saturday Night Football, you know, NASCAR, and have a beer. I like beer. Let's have more beer. So we start planting these crops, large wholesale scale, because we got nothing else to do. And after a while, it's like, you know, this really sucks. Let's go get those losers over in the camp next door and make them do it for us. So it's kind of where this whole thing started. Not blaming everything on beer. I hadn't tried to before, but I bet you it would work. But annual crops. This is what all of the quote-unquote civilized cultures now depend and have depended on annual crops as their food for their staple foods, carbohydrates, proteins, and oils. One of the interesting things, do the research. This is your homework now. Every single culture that has ever based its staple food crops diet on annual crops. These are plants that require disturb the soil. You have to destroy a currently perennial ecosystem. You have to destroy it and expose the bare black dirt, throw a couple of seeds down. It grows really fast and gives you a whole bunch of other hard seeds. Every culture that's ever depended on annual plants as their staple food crops has collapsed. Every single one of them. Well, except one. Except one. You know, the amazing architecture. Do you think these monumental structures were made by people saying, wow, for the joy and creativity of expression, I want to help to build the amphitheater? Well, one of the things about annual grains is they could be stored long periods of time, and then all these unemployed hunters can now be put to work. You work for me, bring your sticks and stones, and you guard this pile of good stuff here and make sure that nobody else gets it. You want some? You help to make a coliseum in my honor because I'm the dude and all this kind of stuff. And it's just been propagating down through the ages. But just like an annual plant, you throw the annual seeds on the ground, it grows wicked fast and then collapses. Doesn't that sound like our economy? It has to go through this period of expanded rapid growth and all of a sudden, it's a correction. Yeah, correction, all right. I mean, look at the size of this guy. And notice all these pictures. Why on earth would people build these massive structures and cities in the middle of wastelands? They didn't. They didn't. These were the richest, most fertile, most abundant places. This had all of the resources to grow, top crops, to plenty of water, sanitation removal, timber for fires and roofs and warships and weapons. Every single one of these cultures consumed their resource base, destroyed their resource base, and when theirs was about to fall apart, they were forced to go take over somebody else to take all their goodies. And it has not changed to this day. Every continent, Southeast Asia, oh, this is the best deal right here, I love this. Gee, the economy's faltering. What do we do? What do we do? Me and the kings, we got to keep these people. There's these bad guys out there, and they're going to come to get us. They're insinuating every part of our society, and we have to make sure we got to root them out. So let's go arrest our own local people and then put them to work in the slave camps to build a wall to protect us from the bad guys. So what you do is you go out here, if you're one of those that were confiscated, after a while it's like, well, gee, we only have so many slaves to put to work. We need volunteers. So let's kind of slow down the metering of food here, make them a little bit more hungry. Hey, a cup of rice, you can come out and work and have the joy of celebration of building your greatest defensive thing, good for your country. So what you do is you work out here for your cup of rice a day, work you to death. Do you think you did it out of joy? It was done at the edge of a spear, a sword, and a whip, with dogs snapping at your heels. And then when you finally were either worked to death or you starve to death from malnutrition and all that kind of stuff. They'd then skin you, use your hides for products back in the cities. They would take your meat and feed it to the guard dogs, pound your bones to bits to put in the concrete mix, and your hair as a binder in the mortar. The Great Wall of China was the best jobs creation program that the planet has ever seen. 1,000 years worth of jobs. And how many millions of souls have their bodies entombed in the mortar inside the Great Wall of China? So yeah, I'm into civilization, man. It's the coolest thing. Yeah. Just so some 12-year-old kid who happens to be son of Grand Poobah can theoretically have a golden boat to sail across the river of what? Excuse me? Once again, why did they do this in the middle of a wasteland? They didn't. These are the most fertile, abundant places around. A little bit of ecological reality here. There's 4 places in the world where there's a north-south mountain range and a coastal plain that varies up to like 40 to 150 miles wide that borders on an ocean, a warm ocean to the west. And it creates conditions that are similar to a USDA Zone 8, a Mediterranean-type climate. Duh, why did we call it a Mediterranean-type climate? It has extended gray, misty, cloudy winters, a little bit of rainfall, long, dry, hot summer. Well, in order for plants to survive that, they have to have some pretty good strategies. A lot of cacti, they just don't use much water. Other plants have a huge storage capacity, and they just store it in the tubes in their body. And so these kind of climates, these kind of zones, whatever, were a selection pressure selecting for species of plants that could store the most amount of water to last the longest time in the home to the tallest trees on the face of the planet, the largest trees. In New Zealand, it was the kauri, K-A-U-R-E. South America is the alerce, A-L-E-R-C-E. North America, it was the sequoia and the redwood. And in the Middle East, the Mediterranean, it was the cedars of Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon were the redwood forests. I've never been to the redwood forest, seen lots of pictures. But if you've been to the redwood forest, who has? Can you imagine the whole entire Middle East? We see the Middle East in the news almost every day, right? Can you imagine the Middle East is the redwood forests? These right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. This was in the 90s, I believe, when this picture was taken. These are the last stands of the last natural stands of the cedars of Lebanon. They surround the whole entire Mediterranean. This is kind of where our version of annual agriculture got started. And you go to an area, you clear the forests, you build your houses and your warships and your spears, you plow up the ground, it erodes out to sea, and it buries seaports. Tyre and Sidon, Corinth, all these different historical seaports have been buried in silt and sediment. And it's not just flatland agriculture that's eroding it, because you're cutting more and more for warships and fuel going up the hillsides. All the hillsides erode. Look at all the lack of soil. And buried all these coastal ports. This is what the Middle East today is what annual agriculture does. It's living evidence right now of what it does. Of course, it won't happen here, though, because we're scientific, we're smart, we got the land grant institutions, and we're a democracy and good ideas and meritocracy, all this kind of stuff. This continent, a mere 200 years ago, was a virtually intact living ecology. It was a perennial ecological system. Everything that you see here that's green, yellow, or red is agricultural land, meaning annual crops, meaning it's plowed, meaning that for 8 months out of the year, it's, for all practical purposes, bare black dirt. If there is any photosynthesis going on, it's a cover crop of winter rye, and cover crops are so underutilized, and it's only 3 inches tall. That is not a whole, healthy, intact ecosystem. This is pesticide runoff and leaching potential. If you live in a red spot, that's called bad. This is USDA data here from a book they called America's Private Land, A Geography of Hope. Our groundwater, I live right at like the Iowa-Minnesota border. You go 30 miles into Wisconsin, right about there, if I can stop wiggling. Our well water is contaminated with atrazine and nitrates. Now, how is it that we're told on one hand that, it takes geological eons to recharge the aquifers, and we can get toxic waste down there in 60 short years? We can recharge the aquifers. We can recharge it with clean water. If we can recharge it with chemicals, we can recharge it with clean water. It doesn't take geological millennia. Nitrogen phosphate fertilizer loss from farm fields. Where I live in southwest Wisconsin, I've also smelled it in, matter of fact, where's Amy? She left already. Okay, good. And it was in her neck of the woods in Athens, not Athens, Ohio, Yellow Springs, Ohio area, that it was like one spring I'm driving through, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, everything smells like cat pee. Urine. What is urine composed of? There's an N in it, right? There's all this N, all this nitrogen fertilizers washing downstream. Well, farmers know that nitrogen is fairly volatile, and it washes downstream, so that's why you put on more, because you have a normal expected loss, right? Well, all that is just running down the Gulf of Mexico, over-fertilizing the Gulf of Mexico, have these algal blooms that then die and suck out all the oxygen. We have dead zones. So nitrogen phosphate fertilizer loss. Yeah, they're calling it fertilizer loss. They're not saying this is pollution caused by agriculture. Oh, those poor farmers lost their fertilizer.
So is it more from the lawns, fertilizing lawns, or agriculture?
Is it more from lawns or agriculture? I don't know the data and statistics on that, but from my perspective, it doesn't matter. The problem is this stuff right here. Back. Okay. Sediment delivered to rivers and streams from sheet and rill erosion. This is the erosion you can't even see. This isn't gully erosion. When it rains 1.5 inches in an hour, and your soil can only absorb 1 inch of rain, that raindrop pounds the soil surface, and it gets all that material into suspension. If you're taking like a canning jar full of dirt and you shake it up with water, that's what the raindrop does. And you sit it like that, and it'll settle down. But if it can't saturate into the soil, it just starts to sheet, and it moves along the hillsides with gravity. And if you ever walk through the lawn, it goes squish, squish, squish. That's basic sheet erosion happening. You have suspended clay particles in that water, and it's just slowly sheeting along the surface where it goes down in the streams and goes out to the Gulf of Mexico and so on. In the red areas here, my part of Wisconsin is barely out of that red area. No, wait a minute, I'm right there. Yeah, barely out of it. About 2 millimeters of topsoil per acre per year in annual agriculture. Well, 2 millimeters of topsoil, this is an acceptable loss. Let's accept 2 millimeters. What's 2 millimeters, right? 2 millimeters of topsoil loss per year. Let's do it organic, okay? Let's now do it organic and do all these amendments, increase our organic matter, but still do annual cropping. That's less bad, right? Well, folks, less bad is not good, okay? Less bad is not good. I'm not here to diss organic. I've been certified organic since 1995. 2 millimeters of topsoil in 1 acre piles up into a pile of how big of topsoil per acre? It's a 20-yard dump truck full of topsoil. Anybody have a landscape done recently in town, the suburbs? Viroqua, Wisconsin, I just actually helped with the landscape job this spring. $400 for a 20-yard load dump truck of topsoil. So every acre of ground has a real loss to their basic productivity of $400 a year that's not accounted for on the books. And every once in a while, historically, the soil just picks up and blows away. My mother's father lost a family farm during the Dust Bowl. These stories of how they lost a farm during the Dust Bowl are part of the family culture and family history. How many people here have family history where somebody lost a farm during the Dust Bowl? And most of the places in the Midwest, there are people who remember being kids when this happened. Okay, this is not ancient history. The conditions of this planet haven't changed. Matter of fact, they haven't changed anywhere but worse. That this is more at risk of happening now than ever before. Give us a couple more summers like this and a pretty good wind, and watch what's going to happen in Nebraska. Plus, my grandpa lost a family farm during the Dust Bowl when he had 2 horses, and he's plowing the ground with 2 horses. What do we got now? We have the ultimate accelerant, lubricant and fuel. Man, away we go. Now we have 455-foot wide combines with hyper overdrive and GPS and surround sound and text while you drive, all that kind of stuff. We can destroy this place in spades like never before. And the whole fossil fuel thing, whenever you have a resource that the demand for it is increasing, this is demand, the demand is increasing, and what's being produced is not really keeping pace with it. Even if what's out there starts to increase, like nowadays, this chart needs to be adjusted a little bit. It's starting to do this again because they're finding more, fossil fuels out there. Doesn't matter. As more people are competing for this resource that we can only get out of the ground fast enough, what's going to happen to the price? Who actually wants to be bold enough to claim to be the oldest person in this room? Whoever the oldest person in this room, look around and ask them, hey, has the price of fossil fuels and anything related to fossil fuels ever gone down Really, I mean, gone down. Sure, it does this stuff just enough to get us convinced that, oh my goodness, it's too expensive, so we slow down, so we drop the price, so we speed back up again. It never goes down, won't go down, will not go down. And as long as you are dependent on this for all of your inputs, and you're destroying your resource base, washing your soil away, your resource base is getting poorer, your expenses are going up. That's called a divergent equation. It will never work, okay? It will never work. And annual agriculture has a 10,000-year proven track record of never working, okay? Just doesn't, hasn't, never can. It's totally out of sync with ecology. What the heck is this slide doing here? This is actually an ecological process being played out in one of the most complex social organisms on the planet. What happens, let's go to the National Geographic movie in your mind here. Out in the savanna, out from underneath these trees and bushes, we see some zebra kind of walking around out there. The lionesses, notice who's doing the work here. The girls are hanging out in the bushes. They go out and they pounce on the zebra, they tear it limb to limb. Then the guys come out, away from the television, they put down the remote, hey, thanks, honey, and then they start eating the lion. Well, eating the zebra, right. So then hiding also in the bushes were these jackals or hyenas. Now, jackals and hyenas are great at hunting little things like mices and rabbitses and stuff like that, but that doesn't really keep them going. It kind of fills the belly for a while. They need this big chunk of meat and fat to survive on. But they don't have the skills or the ability to go get it on their own. But what they do have is this organizational capacity to go top down from the dominant male all the way down to the youngest little pup who can run this fast. And they will organize linear hierarchy and they attack those lions that are out there. They will risk their life, their individual lives and limbs to get that dead zebra because their whole entire culture depends on that dead zebra. Currently, right now, our entire culture is dependent on these dead dinosaurs or whatever they are. We will do anything and everything that we have to in order to get those dead dinosaurs. This is an ecological reality because of how our culture is structured. We are, whether we believe it or not, we are subject to ecological laws. And this is ecology playing itself out in human culture. And of course, as part of this ecology playing itself out in human culture, this is actually an award-winning certified organic farm in Wisconsin. They've gotten supersonic awards for being sustainable, the most sustainable around. And I know the people who actually run this farm, and they're driven by the fact that we have to produce enough food, fuels, medicines, and fibers for the 7 to umpteen billion of us that are on this planet. We have to do it. They're motivated in part because the chemical guys are saying we need to go GMO and spray and poisons and all this kind of stuff and 10 million acre farms. And these organic heroes, this guy owner is one of the heroes of mine, said we're going to do it organic and we can go head to head with them, we can match them on yields and all that kind of stuff. And he's doing it, they're doing it. Where organic is matching yields and exceeding yields for lower inputs than conventional agriculture. And he's probably driving that tractor right now, going through his head, listening to the UN statistics that say that we have to double the world's food supply in the next 40 years just to keep up. Okay, what happens after that? Don't even think about the math because we can't. It ends. The equation stops. It blows up. We can't do it. So he's trying to double the world's food supply in the next 40 years, and he's missing the point. He's missing the point 100% totally. What's happened to his resource base? Whew, out the window, blowing down to the next farm, next county, next state. His expenses, his fossil fuels expenses are going way up. If we're farmers, really what we are is we are photosynthesis managers. We grow green things. We either sell the green things directly for our economic livelihood, or we feed those green things or their seeds to animals, and we sell the animals or the animal products, milk and eggs and so on, to somebody else. So our business really is capturing as much photosynthesis as we possibly can. Knee high by the 4th of July. Everybody's heard that, right? Corn's going to be that tall by the 4th of July. The 4th of July is 2 weeks after the longest days of the year. More than half of the year's sunlight is already gone, and the plant's this big. Is that an effective way to capture sunlight? I don't think so. Here he is, he's out tilling. This is actually June 26th, 5 days after summer solstice. He's already missed half the year's light, it's gone. These trees have been green for a month, and the grass has been green for a month. What captures sunlight for a longer period of time during the year? These perennials or the annuals? Right there. Now what we got to do as we go through this is start to, in our own minds, we have to rethink. Remember I said we're redesigning everything? The whole kit and caboodle, everything. We need to understand in our own minds what is the difference between an observation and a concept. And always keep monitoring yourself. First permaculture principle is observe, observe, observe. How can we observe if we don't really know the difference between an observation and a concept? Observation is something you can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, measure with instruments, derive through testing. And so that if you observe something and explain to me how you observed it, even if I speak a different language or use different metaphors, I can observe the same phenomena, and he can and she can and so on. A concept, however, is an intellectual idea. It's just an intellectual construct that we use to describe an observation. It may sound kind of crazy, but when I explain this, it'll be a little bit easier. Anybody ever heard of the term invasive species? Name one organism on the face of the planet that has an intellectual concept called invasion. Yeah, invasion is a concept. So when we put this concept on and we view the world through our concept, we are seeing what? The invasion. And so all of invasive species science does what? How do you respond to an invasion? You fight! So the whole entire invasion science is warped. It's twisted because of these concepts. I was working with a client, actually it was this last weekend in Iowa, and she made the comment, oh yeah, there were no acorns this year because of the drought. What part of that was the observation, and which part of that was the concept? So we just need to really be careful here. The observation may very well have been there were no acorns this year. The concept, oh, because of the drought, may be so wrong and so off base that you make management decisions based on this concept that lead you off into the wrong direction. And annual agriculture is all about living through our concepts. As a matter of fact, how about the concept agriculture? Do you guys get a picture in your mind? How about the concept forestry? Do you get a picture in your mind? How about a concept orchard? Do you get a picture in your mind? I love this one, orchard. All of the problems to be found in an orchard have been caused by our concept of an orchard. That is not what apple trees, cherry trees, peach trees, nut trees, that is not what they do. That's our idea that we've imposed on reality, and then when reality doesn't behave according to our idea, what do? We input, we input, we input, we input. We can never input enough to make our false concept correct. Another concept and observation. It takes 1,000 apple seeds. Take 1,000 apple seeds if you plant them to get one good variety of apple tree. So don't bother planting your seeds. What's the observation and what's the concept? The observation may be it takes 1,000 apple seeds to get one good variety. The concept, so therefore don't save your apple seeds, don't plant apple seeds. What has that concept done? Let's change the concept. Same observation. Takes 1,000 apple seeds to get one good variety. Now let's make 10 varieties. What does changing the concept do to reality? All of a sudden, if it takes 1,000 apple seeds to get one good variety, we want 10 new varieties, we've got to plant 10,000 seeds. How many of you have planted 10,000 apple seeds to get new varieties? Well, we got one, all right. She's already busted that concept. So just be aware of these concepts and these observations, and when we have something that we see as a truth, just say, wait a minute. Is that an observable truth, or is that a concept? Is that an idea that somebody has invented? One of my teachers or my mentors, I hate it when some of my most foundational mentors, the stuff that I've believed and known has been true for on and on and on, all of a sudden it's like, oh, gee, that's just his idea, and it's not true and it doesn't work. It's just crushing what it does inside. So we gotta bust through this. We're gonna bust through every single concept that we have ever held before, because we gotta find out the truth and turn this thing around. So, some of our basic foundational things when we start. Prior to European settlement, this place right here, Louisville, Kentucky, or my farm or your farm, was it was photosynthetically productive. It was a perennial system and had supported a rich variety of life for a Brazilian years. No commercial fertilizers, no pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides, no expenses for a long time. Can we design a farm to operate that way? Well, I'm not going to say can we design a farm. Well, let's design a farm to operate that way. then can we supply the staple food crops, the carbohydrates, proteins, and oils that are currently provided by our annual crops? The answer, of course, is yes again, and that's what we're going to do. Here's where I kind of make a distinction, and it's only, this is one of my concepts. To me, farm is a scale thing, and it's a type of product. For me, a farm scale is when we're growing staple foods for humanity, carbohydrates, proteins, and oils. Smaller farm are like the CSAs, the produce, direct market consumer, all that kind of stuff. They're critical and they're important, but I don't call those farms in the same way that somebody growing staple foods is a farm. And that's just purely my arbitrary invention or distinction. Everybody else has one. Can we design this thing to be economically viable within the current economic system? And this is the big trick that if we're all farming, any of us are farming, this is the big one we're wrestling with no matter what system we're in. Some of the permaculture principles. Let's observe and imitate nature. And we want to work with nature rather than fight nature. In my book, Restoration Agriculture, oh yeah, did you hear that? I wrote a book. See? Just like right here. After this thing, I'll be out at the book table signing copies of it and all that kind of stuff. I start with know your biome. This is observing. Where do you live? What kind of plants used to live there? What kind of animals used to live there before Europeans? That's the first place to start. Let's observe that. What worked before we got here? And then let's imitate that as close as we can while substituting the things that actually will return us some economic return and feed us. The most widely distributed biome in North America happens to be the oak savanna. That's why I've chosen it. It actually goes all the way to the west coast, but once you hit the Rocky Mountains, there's an entirely different family of plants. They're still oak savanna based, but there's different subspecies that fall within there. The North America, eastern part was primarily forested, closed canopy forest when the trees close over and it shades out the grasses. That's kind of the definition of forest. Out here was primarily grassland, mostly grasses. It would be punctuated here and there with islands of trees and ribbons of trees along the streams. Well, in the middle, it was a sloshing back and forth of forms. There was some true forest, closed canopy forest. There were some true grasslands. There was like some forest that had got burned out underneath and the grass came in underneath. There was like brush growing up on the side of the road kind of look to it. So all of this was a sloshing back of forms in between. These were the savanna biomes of North America. Interesting detail is that the savanna biomes worldwide are the biomes that produce the most mammal biomass per acre of any other biome anywhere. You got back to your National Geographic Savanna movie in your head, and that's a place where the explorers went and saw all these animals out in this big grassland field. All of the oak savanna biomes have this family of species represented in it. So all we're going to do is observe nature, then we're going to imitate it and create it into a farm. One of the things that also bugs me about my fellow permaculturists is everybody sits around. There's this one listserv that's driving me nuts. I don't even respond to anymore, but I just read what is going on. Is we have to invent and create new guilds, and a guild is an association of plants that live together with one another. And they say, oh, let's try this with this and this with that, and this with this and this. So they're playing with all this stuff when the answer is right out their front door. So if we all of a sudden imitate nature, which is what permaculture number 1 tells us to do, observe and imitate, oaks, chestnut, and beech. Oak was the most widely distributed on all of this. Chestnut was mostly Appalachian, higher elevations that came, out to the rivers somewhat, really heavily concentrated right in here. And beech was mostly maritime, northern tier, and up into here. There's some up in Canada, up in this way. It was all the way down the Appalachians. It was more moister sites was the beech. What do those 3 things have in common? You have a big, large nut. You have a big, large nut. So we'll just put Fugazi here. Unfortunately for me as a farmer, if I want to get crops, oak and beech have this peculiar habit of not producing nuts every single year. Chestnut, on the other hand, produces nuts every single year and abundant quantities of it, which had to be its strategy, its survival strategy, because it would survive with these other trees in the same area sometimes. And if you have these trees that are only producing nuts every once in a while, everybody noticed like when the oaks drop their acorns when there's a big year, it's like marbles everywhere. The critters can't keep up with it. Whereas the chestnuts had their survival strategy. As soon as they hit the ground, they got to put a root in the ground. And when they put their root in the ground, they start to plant. They become unpalatable, not tasty to these to these animals. And they would also spoil if they didn't sprout right away. So if like a critter bites it, and like doesn't finish the whole thing, it'll just rot. So its strategy was to bury the critters with way too many nuts, rot half of them, and then have the other ones sprout and turn bitter right away. If I'm going to pick a crop in this area for a tall tree, why not pick one that gives me crops every single year? One of the neat things about chestnuts also, on the 100 oldest trees in the world, about the 35th oldest tree on the whole entire planet is La Castagna di Santo Cavalli in Sicily, and growing in the rock on the eastern flank of Mount Etna in Sicily. 4,200 years old. For like 4,190 years, this thing's been producing edible human crops with no care, no soil. Oh, another heresy, no soil. The understory would have been one of a couple things. Apples. Prior to European settlement, of course, they would have been mostly prairie crabs. Another component that's in there were the prunus, cherries. Black cherry was one of the more common wild ones. Then in a shrub layer, we had hazelnut. I'm kind of putting them all close together like this. Hazelnut was a dominant shrub from like all around in here, all the way up through here. It goes all the way out the rivers. And if you ever go to Boulder, Colorado, go up Boulder Creek, and you'll follow the hazelnuts all the way up the creek, all the way up to Ward. It's amazing. The prunus right here, they had tall varieties, like the cherries could be up in this layer, or there were bush varieties. There's even stuff that clamber, crawl along the ground really low. The cherries, plums, peach, apricots, almonds are all in that prunus family. Well, then there were raspberries and blackberries doing this, vining dinosaur thing, sea monsters trying to go out into the grassland and recolonize the grassland. And then currants living in the shade, like this. Grapes climbing on the whole mess. And then the decomposition. Whoop, what happened? I'm going backwards, that's why. Then the fungi. All this biomass is now decomposing somehow from brackets to toadstools. The green grass grew all around. And the animals. Now that we've observed nature, let's imitate this. Do you think that we can design a farm that utilizes any of these species? I wonder if we have any options. Let's see. Hello. What if we stack this on top of this, on top of this, on top of this, on top of this, with this crawling all over the place, this in the shade, that decomposing the whole thing, and these things grazing all around? You think we could do something like that? Every biome on the planet has supported human life in abundance forever, and the only technologies that most people have used are a stick and a stone. So we don't need all of our high-tech whiz-bang gadgetry in order to have a system like this work forever, really. These family of species are adapted to dry sites, wet sites, far northern sites. I've seen oak savanna up in central Manitoba between these two lakes with this beautiful hazelnut understory and these little crab apples, little yellow crab apples all over the place. All the way down into Central America. Here we go. This is where I have to do this. This is great. One of the reasons I've mentioned already that this oak savanna is the biome that produces the most mammal biomass per acre, right? Well, one of the reasons why is because, believe it or not, it's actually the most photosynthetically productive biome on the planet. People say, oh, the rainforest. So no, the rainforest has the most biomass. But its photosynthesis layer is only this little canopy layer and a little bit in the dark shade underneath. Whereas the savanna has this deep, deep, deep three-dimensional architecture that goes from all the way up here, 100 feet, all the way down to the ground. Anytime, another thing about imitating nature, we'll talk a little bit about patterns later. Whenever in nature, something, a medium, a material, or energy wants to be exchanged between this and that, our lungs, for example, the air comes in order to optimize that relationship between our body and the atmosphere, nature makes these deep, convoluted shapes. All the way through our intestinal tract, all the way through it, we want to absorb as much food as we can. We've got these little villi in there. All these shapes, whenever you see nature making these deep, convoluted shapes, that's optimizing the exchange of information or materials between media. So if we've got, all right, I saw this guy over here. Where was he? I saw you snoring. Can't get away this time. Where did he go? All right, let's pretend this is 1 acre of ground. I'm growing soybeans. Since remember we're farmers, we're growing green stuff, we're in the photosynthesis business. If this is an acre of soybeans, how many acres of soybeans can I plant on an acre of soybeans? I stumped him. How about you? If this is 1 acre of ground, it's 1 acre. He even just woke up. Actually, that was great. He heard the question, he was ready for it. So if this is 1 acre, Let's put it down there. There's our baseline acre. That fan's going to blow it over. So if in the previous demonstration we showed that this is 1 acre, 1 acre of photosynthetic surface area, how much is this? How much is this 1 acre? This 1 acre. It's still 1 acre. You guys are trying to game me here. So let's give this thing a little bit of structure. This was 1 acre, thank you. Pardon? Allegedly. Right, this is 1 alleged acre, right. Or theoretical, or potential, or possible, or another 1 acre. So what you see already, by just adding a little structure, like a tree, we now have 3 of these 1 acre photosynthetic surface areas on the same acre of ground. Not everybody's going to be able to see this little demonstration, the folded paper thing. So this is where the trick question does come in. And this young woman down on the floor has been acting way too smug. So if we had the original 1 acre of ground, right? Now we put these 3 new acres of photosynthetic surface area on it. How much total photosynthetic surface area do we have?
3 acres.
4. We never lost the first acre. Yield only increases, all right? Now, yield of what matters, because we're not going to be able to grow corn in the shade of these trees, in the complete shade of these trees, so it's just going to be a different crop. Anytime you go into any forested area, wooded area, there are things that grow in the shade. There are plants that are adapted to the shade. Now is when I really get tricky. If this was 1 acre, all right, and this is when it gets stupid, give me a break. How much is that? That's a half acre. Don't be afraid. I'm not, you know. I do bite, but so and then we put a half acre under here, a half acre under here, a half acre under here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 acres worth of photosynthetic surface area where we formerly had 1 acre of photosynthetic surface area. We've just multiplied 500% our photosynthetic surface area. 500%. That's why you got this deep structure here. We got 500% more photosynthetic potential going on out here. We can feed a lot more stuff, which ends up turning into mammals. Oh, that's a surprise. Doesn't that look similar? Look at that. Look at that. Most mammal biomass at any biome on the planet. It's said that savannas capture between 3 and 7 times the total energy per acre as an annual crop field. So if we got 3 to 7 times the energy to play with, I think we have some potential for agriculture here, don't you? 3 to 7 times the energy per acre is corn or soybeans. Wow, yeah, we've got potential. Now, if you've been to one of my presentations before, you are not allowed to answer this next question. What was the dominant grazing animal right here in Louisville, Kentucky before people got here? Buffalo, bison, elk, mastodon. These are the elephant savannas of North America. These are the elephant savannas of North America. This was also the overlap with the southeastern populations of Columbian mammoth that went down into the tropics in Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, these are and the soils here. These are some of the most fertile soils on the planet. Towards Chicago is even crazier fertile soils. These soils were built over the millennia of animals grazing, trampling, pooping and peeing, eating each other. Not one single earthworm. Our Lumbricus terrestris is not even native to this continent. All of the flowering plants that evolved around here evolved without any honeybees. No colony nesting bees on this continent at all. And yet we had, what's interesting about the elephant savannas of North America, these were the humid, temperate savannas of the planet. These are the richest, most abundant, fertile savannas that ever existed on the planet, right here. So we cut them all down, bulldoze them, and plant soybeans. Okay, so I'm breeding mastodon. It's a slow process. I'm selecting from amoeba first, and I'm going to get there over time maybe. It hasn't worked yet. How about we do some substitutions? What if we kind of add some cowies in there, and some piggies, and some turkeys, and some sheepies, and some chickies, and then we got a farmer. Now show me in this system, first of all, the plant system is perennial. It's here forever. If we're selecting chestnut trees, they'll last 4,000 years. If we're selecting hazelnut bushes, I've touched hazelnut bushes that were 1,600 years old over in Spain. They were planted by the Romans. So if we got trees that are 1,600 to 4,000 years old, do you think we have a potential for long-term productivity? In this system that also captures 3 to 7 times the energy per acre as an annual crop field, where is the need for the high-tech this, that, and the other thing, the 45-foot wide combine, the million-gallon manure lagoon, and so on and so on and so on. And we've got this little farmer down here. Where's even the need for fossil fuels at all? Well, personally, I'll go for a little electric fence because we can do this really well with electric fence now. We can do a mob stock rotational grazing and really make this system hum. We take our crops from up here and our income, our food from up here and our income from down here. And what happens we'll talk about it a little bit, during the savanna phase of site development, if you start at bare rock after the glaciers and it goes through time and turns into its like climax ecosystem, which there isn't one anymore because we know that things just go around and around and around. This is in a phase called aggradation. Aggradation. What's the opposite of aggradation? Degradation, that's right. That means soil nutrients are becoming more available, fertility is increasing, species diversity is increasing, and total site yield is increasing. Individual component yield within the system might not be the maximum. You might not get the maximum pounds of hazelnuts per acre as you would in an orchard of hazelnuts, but the total site will yield way more total yield than any other system out there. This is how nature works. So if we don't have all that overhead expense of all these different things, where's the need for inputs? Any inputs. This whole area here, all the fertility that our forefathers inherited and have plowed away into oblivion was created over millennia by this exact system, except with different players on the field. In theory, if we don't have all that overhead and we're increasing the total site yield, site productivity, we should end up with this in the bank. Well, that's the thing that we're all working on again. And somebody a couple of years ago, a person was interviewing me and they said, "Oh, to what do you attribute your success?" I'm like, "Success? Who are you kidding?" It's like, well, you don't realize how I live, man. I live in a cardboard box. It takes me, 70 hours a day, 40 days a week just to get my stuff done. You mean successful? Well, you're still here. I'm like, wow. Because then I looked around, all these neighbors who've come and gone, there are these young people that come and gone to start a sustainable farm. They show up, they invest all this stuff in infrastructure and hoop houses, and they do everything according to all the books different say, and they start losing money year after year after year after year, and then they leave because it doesn't pay. I've seen that all around me over and over again. I'm going to tell a mythical story. A mythical story. This kind of agriculture here is so financially viable. A person I was working with has a fairly large produce operation. And they've got interns, so they're not paying their help. They've got all kinds of these free materials that are getting from the city. They're bringing in like leaves and composting, so doing all this compost work, all this fertility building. They're stirring stuff, making the effective microorganisms. They're doing everything sustainable and right. And for 3 years in a row, this person lost between $10,000 and $15,000 a year. Comes up to me and said, "We need some help." I said, "Well, okay. Well, what's going on? What have you been growing with the crops? What's the markets? What are the expenses?" So, all right, here's my suggestion. And I said, "Well, do you have any seed left from last year?" "Yeah." "Okay. Take a handful of every single kind of seed that you have, take some of those potatoes, cut them up, throw them out in the middle of the field, and ignore them. Don't do anything." It's like, "Whoa, time out. What I've just done is I've showed you how, with zero cash, 5 minutes of time, and how much labor, toss over hand, a little bit of labor, zero labor, let's say, and you have increased your yield by $10,000, okay? You can't do that in Wall Street. Try doing that in Wall Street. Give them $0 and see how much they give you back, okay? Now that sounds funny, but think about that. We have to throw the whole entire old way of thinking out the window because it ain't working anymore, all right? It never has worked, it just slowly crumbles. But remember, less bad is not good. And going out of business is the ultimate non-sustainability. Chestnuts. Interesting about chestnuts, what's really neat is they qualify as a staple food crop. They're a high carbohydrate, low oil, low protein. What's interesting about them is nobody has ever been discovered to be allergic to chestnuts. They're not a true tree nut. If there's a botanist in the audience, tell me why it's not a nut. It's some other kind of structure, but it's still whatever the seed is. We call it a nut. It doesn't have a hard shell like other nuts. It's got a leathery skin that you peel off. So this is corn. It grows on trees.
What kind of chestnut are you talking about?
Now, what kind of chestnut we're talking about? Now we're talking about the details. We don't really have time to get into the details, but depending on where you live, if you're in USDA zone 5 or 6 and warmer, go with Chinese chestnuts. I live in an area here. Think about this crazy guy. I'm going to go to Wisconsin, and I'm going to start this kind of agriculture. I'm going to start industries, not just a farm. I'm going to start a chestnut industry in a state where chestnuts don't grow. Okay, it's too cold. Chinese chestnuts freeze to the ground. If American chestnuts go there, they'd survive the cold, but they get chestnut blight. So in the book, it describes the breeding process. We're doing Luther Burbank-style mass selection. It's like we're herding trees. We start by bringing all these different herds of cattle to our farm. Trees, same thing. We're treating trees like cattle. Once we get our herd on site, we cull 95% of them, get rid of them, because they're not meeting our specifications on the site. I'm not going to spend money taking care of this tree to baby it, to get it healthy. Most conferences you go to, there's 2 questions that it deals with. How do I keep this thing alive that wants to die? And how do I kill this thing that wants to live? All right? As long as those are the 2 questions that you're asking, those are the concepts that you're viewing the world out of, and you will fail. We just step right out of that. If it wants to die, good riddance. It's gone. And I'll be doing tours, and people go like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with your apple trees? Like, who cares? Who cares? It's out of the gene pool. I don't care. You know, but you could add this, and it would help. And then it's another thing. Everything here, and I apologize to all the vendors that are here. They have a lot of good products here. Everything here tells you what to do. Do. Add this, mix this, plow this, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And all these promises that your farm will now be less bad because you're doing. Doing is an expense. Whether it's chemical, whether it's biological, whether it's labor, doing is an expense. And when you do to your agriculture, you will find that there's no end to the stuff that we can do. And there's no end to the money we can lose in agriculture if we want to. So my patented management technique for most of our plants, we're a little bit more nice to our animals, is called stun. Sheer, total, utter neglect. Can anybody think they're competent enough to handle that? I can do that. This guy's an expert already, right? So apples, another part of this component here, food, juice, vinegar, alcohol. If anybody's looked around and seen apples growing in the wild, these ratty, gnarly kind of things, why on earth would our ancestors thought that was like good food to eat? Well, they didn't eat apples. Apples aren't food. If you go, one of the first things that permaculturists do is like, oh yeah, we want to have an orchard so we'll have lots of food. When was the time you ever sat down and ate apples as a meal? Once or twice. It's a dessert, it's a tasty thing, it's a vitamin, it's sweet, it's whatever. It's not food, it won't feed you, you'll starve. What it was used for is you squish it to make juice. Well, way back when you squish the juice, oxygen starts working on it, it turns into what? And I'm going to pick this guy right here, because he would have no clue, Sandor. When you add oxygen to fruit juice, it turns into? Vinegar. Yeah. And so then we use vinegar to preserve our other foods, help to start all of our other foods in a fermentation process. So it was already, right now, it was a way for us to preserve our foods. We could drink a little juice right away, but then we preserve our foods. Well, then if you just capped it up and didn't let any air get in there whatsoever, it turns into alcohol. And everybody knows that that's hard apple cider is one of the finest breakfast drinks that mankind has ever invented. President John Adams started his day with a 42-ounce tankard of cider. Every day. Well, every once in a while they make a batch of cider that doesn't taste all that good. We have this equipment that we can rectify the problem. Well, the chemical process of rectification is also known as distillation. So we can distill that alcohol and use it further. Hazelnuts, this little bush. So we've already talked about this component, chestnuts, apples, hazelnuts. They're protein and oil. About the same amount of protein per acre as soybeans, 3 times the oil. Ever pick up a handful of nice dry soybeans? Nice and dry, right? You ever pick up a handful of like nuts in the greasy oil that you get on your hands? Where's there more fats? Not in the soybeans. So why are we pressing these dry little things to get the oil out of it? 3 times the oil. And the protein in it is a complete, this guy's actually snacking on apples over there. I like that. So what we have is we'll have a outstanding animal feed. We have oil for cooking oil or for fuel. Also, the shell, 50% of the yield on an acre of hazelnuts is shell. And hazelnut shell burns as hot as anthracite coal. So we've got fuel that's growing on these trees as well, that we create this coal fuel as a byproduct of eating our nuts. And then every once in a while, there'll be dead branches that we'll want to pull out of here. We'll do some prunings, we'll coppice, we'll do all different kinds of things to generate wood that we can now chip, turn into mushrooms, or just inoculate whole with mushrooms. So now we get extra yields out of this wood biomass, or we just burn it to heat our houses, make fences out of it. Then take the oil, 80% of the oil, and then when we distill our hard cider that tasted bad, the first third of the distillate that comes off has poisons in it for us. There's fusel oils and methanol. If you drink it, you go blind. So good distillers like Sandor, you didn't know he's a distiller too. The top third, they call them the tops. The top third, you pour it in a barrel, 20% tops with 80% oil, and you sit it in a corner. You don't need this huge, biodiesel reactor to make biodiesel. You just sit it in a corner and leave it alone, and this bubble will form in the bottom of gluck that's now glycerin that you can make candles and soap out of. And it's converted naturally into biodiesel fuel. Now, just want to remind us once again, I'm not necessarily talking about gardening, though if you're at the gardener scale, all of this applies to you. If you're at the homestead scale, all of this applies to you. What I am proposing here in the book Restoration Agriculture is all about is a redesign of agriculture, big A agriculture, our food, fuels, medicines, and fibers, to come from systems. Now, how many of you guys ate today? All right, how many of you guys didn't eat today? There's a few, I'm sure that we got a couple fasters in there, all right. If you ate today, you ate from machines. You ate from large-scale agriculture that harvested your staple food crops and fed it to you. And to deny that is to deny gravity, okay? Around the world, all of the crops that I've mentioned here are harvested by machines. Name me 2 countries on this planet where their apple industry, these 2 countries both have horrible human rights abuse records, and they harvest their apples with human labor. China and the USA, okay? Most of us also heard about this country called Brazil that they took their sugarcane waste and then they extract just a little bit extra sugars out of it and then they ferment it and they make ethanol. They're almost fossil fuel independent because they're making all of their ethanol for their vehicle fuels out of waste. There's a country on this planet that's also almost fossil fuel free. It's actually a technically advanced country. They produce 50% of the world's apple ethanol. They also have fossil fuel reserves. Those fossil fuels are their cash flow to support their own economy while they build up their economy. What's that country? Why hasn't anybody heard about this? They're growing perennial crops for their fuel. It's called South Africa. 50% of the world's apple ethanol comes from South Africa. All the politics that are going on in South Africa, let's not say I was necessarily excited about all that. Social inequities that are still there. Around the world, apples are harvested by machines. Can you tell which machine is harvesting apples in Germany and which one's in France? My grandfather's name was Alphonse Bouvet. I got the French in me, so I know what them guys are like there, yeah? These are hazelnuts being harvested with bush hazelnuts being harvested with a blueberry harvester. We have the machinery for this. You can sit in your air-conditioned cubicle on GPS and play Donkey Kong while you're robotically controlling your machines, going across the landscape, harvesting a full, complete, whole, healthy, intact ecology instead of a crop or an orchard. So this is a sweeper for nuts that picks up, chestnuts, hazelnuts, pecans. It's a pecan. That one is used at pecans. And we're not talking about, let's have a tabletop nutcracker that you hand crank. We're talking about industries. This is a facility that cracks hickories and walnuts and pecans. This is a hazelnut operation. We're talking about food, not nibble snacks. 3,500-pound big bags of product. Wholesale production of our staple food crops. How do you handle corn? Even us guys, organic growing corn. It goes in a big, huge machine, in these big, huge silos. This is what we're talking, big, huge agriculture, okay? Because we have a big, huge population on this little, teeny, tiny planet. Some other things with permaculture design principles. Make sure I'm keeping track of time here and moving right along. What's interesting, I already mentioned a little bit about patterns. There's patterns in this universe that, like our patterns in our lungs, that kind of deep convoluted shape. Each pattern that we see around us is revealing to us a function. Something's happening. When we see a natural form and shape, it's like, what's happening there? Something is going from here to there. Something's getting spun out of this. Something's getting sucked in here. Something's getting shattered. There's all these different functions that are revealed to us by the shape in the natural world. And so if we want to have a function occur on our farm, why not put that pattern in place to facilitate it happening? Because when we put that natural pattern in place, it'll seem effortless to us. And a beautiful, poor use of pattern creates work stress and forced function. It's just not right. It doesn't feel good. And here's a classic example. This is a children's library in Viroqua, Wisconsin. This is the parking lot. This happens every spring, this little process right here. Because what's happened, the kids get out of the cars and they run to the library. There's this big dendritic pattern in nature, the natural pattern for accumulating a distributed resource, bringing it into a channel to distribute it. It's a dendritic pattern. The water collecting in the upper headlands, nerve signals in your body, trees reaching up in the atmosphere, and then it transports it through this main trunk and channel, and then it distributes it, like out in the river delta or in the roots of the tree. What's interesting about the dendritic pattern, signals go both ways simultaneously. There's stuff coming up from the tree in the roots coming out to the leaves. There's stuff going out from the branches all the way down to the roots, both ways at the same time. Very efficient, very effective, very easy. The kids running into the library feel great. They're excited. Whee! Well, the city doesn't like that, so they're going to till this up every spring and broadcast grass on it and put the ribbons around it, so you got to go around, around, around. The first stress it's created is they open up the doors of the car. Mom has to carry all the back packages and bundles, and the kids go, "Run! Be careful in the parking lot! Look out for the road!" Stress. Then they run this way, and they run this way. It's taking a lot longer time. Now they're going to have less time doing what they really enjoy in the library, so later on when Mom tries to shuttle them up to take them back home, they're like, "Come on, Mom, will you stay a little bit longer?" Because they were denied that extra time that this inefficient pattern forced on them. Well, then they get out of the library, and they hop on their skateboard and skateboard down the sidewalk and jump off the curb into the street. So when a kid gets hit by a car on his skateboard, what do? They ban skateboards. All right? It's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. Oh, maybe I should take an aspirin. No, it's getting real bad. I need a Tylenol. Ooh, morphine. Pretty soon you're laying down. No, I need surgery and all this kind of stuff. When that kid was not necessarily interested in jumping out into the street and getting hit by a car on a skateboard. He wanted to run in his car and go back home and play Nintendo. That accident waiting to happen was created by bad design. And we have to start designing our farms properly according to natural patterns, the natural flows of resources, because nature has always done everything effortlessly without cost. And that's how I want to farm, is effortlessly without cost. This is an aerial photograph of my farm. Too much detail to get in there. This was done in 100 acres in 15 years. This has the potential of producing increasing yields for the next 1,000 years. This is an ecological system. And all I end up doing is I harvest the yield, and I harvest the yield, and I manage populations. I become a population manager and a harvester. All these patterns that you see, I'm not going to talk too much about it, is the keyline design laid out on the landscape. Landscape naturally takes water, and the shape of the land concentrates it down in the valley. So if a whole acre of ground got 1 inch of rain, the ridges, just because of the shape, don't get that inch anymore because the inch goes away, and the valleys now get twice as much or more. So you got too much water in the valleys, not enough on the ridges. So just with slight modifications, we make the water go from the top of the valleys out to the ridges. So everywhere we have a valley, the water's getting spread to the ridge, spread to the ridge, spread to the ridge, spread to the ridge, everywhere we go. So when the water hits this, it slows down, it spreads out, has time to soak into the ground where it waters my trees. That's what I was going to say. All right, make the smallest input that'll create the biggest long-term impact. Without water, all of our agriculture is gone. Who's from like an irrigated part of the country here? Somebody from like Montana, all that kind of stuff. Man, we shut your water off, you guys are toast. Okay? But if we shape your landscape so that no water is allowed to leave unless it goes underground and gets sucked up by your plants and your trees and all that, you can grow things that you would never believe could grow where you live. And if you all of a sudden start storing your water in the soil and drought comes, as the water table lowers and lowers and lowers and lowers, the tree roots follow it down. So now you're encouraging deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper and deeper rooted plants, whereas if you're surface irrigating, whether it's drip or overhead or a wheel line or pivot, you're just watering the surface and your roots never really develop deep, and somebody forgets to turn the pivot on this week or the computer control glitches out or something, you just lose the whole crop. We're going to take a valley like this where the water formerly would collect, or a system like this where the water would formerly collect in the valleys and run away, spread it out, spread it out, spread it out. Hey, and maybe even when it gets to the bottom, let's pump it back up to the top and start the whole process over again. Every single drop of rainwater that falls on my farm, I claim as mine, regardless as to what the water rights laws say, okay? This is probably legal for me to even say that. Hello, people. That rain fell from the sky. It fell on my land. I'm going to use it in my land, on my land, and for my plants, for my productivity, because that's my job. My job is to grow food for you guys in the city that made these stupid laws in the first place. Quiet. I'm going to be quiet. I have been known to get a little bit enthusiastic. This requires measurement, real measurement, accurate measurement. What we're doing is basically farm-scale civil engineering for water management. And this is a simple A-frame. A bubble level is on it. You can measure perfectly on contour. You can measure, different slope and degree. This is an Earth navigating sextant, if you want, really. And what we do oftentimes is we'll make this 5 foot wide, so then you can go this way, this way, this way, this way, and then when you're looking across a hill, you just count the pink flags, 5, 10, 15, 20. You know exactly how many linear feet you had. So both measures slope and linear feet. I use a laser level. That's the slide I forgot to put in here. We can't trust our eyes to do this. You see these guys, see these flags right along there? Can you see them? I can't really see them here because they're so out of focus. Now you look at this slope this way. That obviously is downhill. This right here is the USDA contour line that they marked out for this farm. Are those flags going, where are those going, uphill or downhill? We've got both. We've got all three answers. I love it. It says down, up, on the level. So it depended on what you would answer is what I'd say. No, these are actually, this one right here, this is all going downhill at a 1% slope. But it looks like it's going uphill in most cases. So, what we're doing here actually is this is a wet spot. USDA EQIP program did this barnyard thing to drain the water from the barnyard so it goes away through the cornfield, eroded the cornfield. It starts to slump and slump until eventually leveled out and made the swamp. They can't grow corn anymore, so they put it into hay. Well, now it's in hay. It's even too wet for the first mowing to go through here without getting your tractor stuck. So they solved this problem of the wet barnyard and made the water go away and caused a new problem. So as a permaculturist, I also like to think of a problem as a profit spelled incorrectly. How do we get this water that's a problem out to the ridge that's already extra dry? There's a problem out here. It's too dry. It dries off early. It's a south-facing ridge. This is all very sandy, gravelly soil. Well, why not set up a earth-shaping system that takes all this water and spreads it out to the ridges? And that's the goal that we're looking for, is to spread that water out, slow it down, and the tools can be used as simple as a one-bottom plow, as complicated as bulldozers and road graders. I've used all of the above in that. See this right here? Is that going uphill or downhill? That is going downhill at a 1% slope. That is going downhill from the top of the valley out to the ridge. The reason why it looks like it's going uphill is because the ridge is doing this. And then you see this that's actually going downhill, and just your eye does these weird adjustments. I've got this picture. It's called 4 concentric circles. And you look at it, and it's like the whole room starts spinning. You're like, whoa. And then you say, yeah, it can't be 4 concentric circles, until you put a pencil on it and a compass, and you go, wow, it is. Because our eyes, they're perfect tools for managing in a rough, crazy landscape and keeps us kind of on keel, but it doesn't always tell us what's actually accurate. Our instruments are important for this one. This is a system on our farm that we did. When I first started doing this, I'd read this book, Water for Every Farm by P.A. Yeomans, and I set up the keyline system on the whole farm. He said that with the keyline design system, we can create 18 inches of topsoil in 3 years. I'm like, my ass, I've made compost. I know how soil is built. It's built from the top up with ceaseless labor. It's very sacred and all this kind of stuff. And since we didn't really know if it was going to work or not, we didn't put swales everywhere. We didn't do keyline subsoiling everywhere. But here we've got in this block of primarily apples, there's a swale above this row of apple trees. There's none above this row of apple trees. There's none above this row of apple trees. And there's a swale above this row of apple trees. Every time that this section from where this picture is taken to my son is standing there, every time there's a 1-inch rain, there's 180 gallons of water that's no longer doing that squish, 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 sheeting and going off my farm. It's soaking in the ground. Over 15 years, it's 90,000 gallons of water has soaked in right above these trees. Do you think that there's a possibility that that could increase yields? Did that tree grow any faster than those and those? This was like four years or so into the program. I couldn't believe it. It's like, oh my goodness, this works. Why didn't I do it everywhere? This is another example here of this pocket pond. It's kind of like up here. So when there's a big, huge rain event, it fills up. And then when it overflows, instead of going down the valley, 600 feet, it's gone from the farm. It's gone 100 feet down. It's erosive, 30 miles an hour. It goes down towards the ridges, 1,200 feet. It goes around the ridge down here this way, goes around the shoulder of the ridge and back the other side of the hill, goes 1,200 feet. It's only dropped 12 feet in elevation, and it's still on my farm. It's never made it all the way around. We even had a 13-inch rain in 1 hour 3 years ago. Never made it all the way around the other side. It all soaked into the ground. Where's that water going? Is that adding to the productivity of the tree downhill from the swale compared to the ones uphill from the swale? It does. Yeah, trust me. You guys are enthusiastic. The pattern that we've set up on the whole farm is an agroforestry pattern. This is alley cropping, where we're growing a crop into alleys. Then we go swale, berm, trees, alley, swale, berm, trees, alley, swale, berm, trees, and so on, repeated over the whole farm. The whole shape of the farm is now determined by optimizing the water flow. Once we put in our swales and berms, that sets the pattern for our roads, for our trees, for our fences. The whole farm is shaped around this new water distribution system. No-cost water distribution system. There are CCC swales that were built back in the 1930s that are still around and still functioning. There are swales all through southern Europe that the Romans built 1800 years ago. They still work. There's old road cuts. Most of the roads in Europe are built on the old Roman roads. These are permanent constructions that will permanently change your farm's relationship with water. We also, when we're doing permaculture, we want to have some functional relationships between elements. And this is a silly story. Okay, I'm going to admit something, and the person is in this room. So I'm going to fictionalize this story, and when I tell this story, please don't blush, because I'm going to make a whole bunch of stuff up. There's this farm in central Illinois that I've done consulting with several different times. The great-great-grandfather first homesteaded it. They dug a hole in the ground, knocked some trees down. They lived in the pit while they started to develop their farm. Then they built this little log house cabin, and then their outhouse is over here. So you got this little... There's this little pit over here, and then their little house was built here, and their outhouse is built there. Well, over the years, family grows, the farm expands. The house keeps getting added onto, gets added onto, and added onto, until it bumps up against the outhouse, and then that's now their inside toilet is where the old outhouse used to be. If you were to drive by this farm, and it's a heritage farm, they do all kinds of research and tours and really cool stuff. It's a really neat place. All the sustainable stuff is going on that you could ever imagine. They've got their sheepy over here, their cowies over here, their crop ground is around here, a restored prairie over here, they've got a vegetable garden over here, they've got a compost pile over here, they've got hay over here, they've got an apple orchard over here, they've got a flower garden here, an herb garden here, the grain is stored here. So what happens, how many of you guys ever have a bowel movement? I know you don't, but it's a different story, okay? You'll be all right. So this is a silly, but it's a simple little fact. All organisms have certain functions that they do all the time. Why not design our farming systems taking into account facts, real things that always happen? This guy, he's a morning person. I'm a morning person. He gets up in the morning, he walks 65 feet to his bathroom, drops his cell phone down the toilet, takes his morning business, and then walks back to his bedroom. And he has accomplished no farm work at all. And he's gone 120 feet. Well, then he gets up and he goes and gets some grain, and he goes, takes it to the pigs and the chickens and the cows, and he throws the compost out over here. There's beehives over here. He checks, some stuff in the garden. He goes back over here. He gets feed for here. He takes, moves the animals around. He's done all this work. He doesn't get his chores. Not like the work of the day. We're talking the basic chores to keep the farm alive. It takes him till 10 o'clock in the morning. This is because his farm has every element of sustainability. It's this Currier and Ives painting. It's beautiful, spectacularly beautiful. It is so dysfunctional, it creates 500 times the work that needs to be done if he had only kind of like did a little bit of design and redesign. Well, now that he's here and we've worked together for 5 or 6 different years, he won't change the pattern of his farm because it's so beautiful. His concept of what a farm should be is this is what a farm should be. And it's killing him. It is killing him. So I'm a morning person. And so what we did, and I actually took some of these ideas out of the Permaculture Designer's Manual, and I took some of the ideas from this guy, Jerome Osentowski, at the Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute in Basalt, Colorado. It's one of the more mature permaculture sites on the continent, about 10 acres or so. So our house in Wisconsin, we built it ourselves. When we built the house, it was legal to have a composting toilet, but it was not legal to have a composting toilet as your primary septic system. So we had to have some other kind of primary septic system. It's not legal to have a pit privy. So we had to build a vault privy, like those concrete tank vault privies that you see at like state parks and stuff. So I put a vault privy over here. Our chicken coop is about the same distance away as this other guy's bathroom is away from his bedroom. So now, this functional connection, we want to functionally connect things. We want this, if I do something here, I'm doing work there, and whatever this is here is supporting that right over there, and everything's going to be connected and helping each other out. So all I have to do is like push one domino, and the whole thing goes, falls into place. Well, we're told that, when we're having food scraps, not to put meat scraps in our compost, because it'll attract vermin, it'll start to get putrid and all this kind of stuff. And so as soon as we hear that you're not supposed to do it, that's exactly what we do. When I come out the front door in the morning, somebody else knows that that's exactly what I do too. And that's the cats and the dogs. Whoever gets there first gets to separate my food scraps for me. So I sit it down. Now I have time with the cats and the dogs. How they doing? Pull some burrs. They got any ticks? How's their health? You squeeze the nose, scratch the bellies, all that kind of stuff. Then I go into the outhouse. One day while sitting in the outhouse, I noticed a orchard mason bee come flying in right by me, carrying a cabbage loop or caterpillar in its claws. Landed on a stud in the outhouse, climbs up over here and it crawled in an anthole. Then it came out. I said, wow, that's cool. I've heard about that. I've read about this. Then did it 3 more times, and then it took off. And then as soon as I finished my business, I grabbed a drill index. I found out how wide is that hole, how deep is that hole, how angled is it, put it in my cordless drill, and I drilled holes everywhere. So you go into my outhouse today, there's all these holes all over the studs, and they're filled with all kinds of wild pollinators. And so what are those wild pollinators doing? They're taking all my cabbage loopers off of my cabbage and my kale. We don't use any sprays, by the way. I'm certified organic. It's not that we use organic sprays. We don't use any sprays at all. So I've come out of the house. I'm only going to the bathroom, mind you, here. I've come out of the house. I've separated my food scraps, said hi to the cats and dogs, taken care of my wild pollinator populations. Then I go over to the to the chicken coop. In the back half of the chicken coop, I got a couple of barrels of feed. We have feed for the livestock, but only enough feed to feed the infant that we get, like the little piggy or the little calf, and to act as bait. So in the morning, I come out there, I can stand right here and have the different barrels of feed, and I can go like this, and I give the whistle for the pigs. The pigs come running in, I scratch the pigs, you talk to the pigs and all that kind of whatever. They get their little feed, and then I can go like this, and then I go over here and I take care of the cattle that can come in another way over here. I turn around and back of me, and I cut mushrooms off the mushroom logs that are in the tank behind the roof. All the roof water catchment's going down to a barrel that can gravity feed out to the animals, the chickens and the cattle and the pigs. Then I lift up the little hatch, grab the eggs out of the little egg boxes. I still moved only 1 foot. I'm pivoting right where I'm going right now. And then I collect the eggs and make sure the chickens have their feed. And then I walk around the corner and I throw the kitchen scraps over the top here. When my youngest son was in kindergarten, he got a bunny. So I had to make a bunny hutch. My dad at one point in time raised rabbits for scientific experiments. We had hundreds of does and had rabbits all the time. He sold, rabbits. And guess whose job it was to clean out from underneath the rabbit hutch? How many of you enjoy cleaning out the manure underneath the rabbit hutch? Just work, isn't it? Well, I don't want to do that. So I put the rabbit hutch on the front of the chicken coop, and notice there's no manure under the rabbit hutch. It's not because the chickens are eating it. The chickens are doing what chickens naturally like to do. They scratch through it, they catch flies, they eat any seeds that might be in there, and they mix the manure with any kind of organic matter that we've tossed over from raked leaves, weeds from the garden, all kinds of organic matter we toss over here. They scratch it all up, they mix it with manure, it falls into a pit at the bottom here, and it begins to decompose. About the middle of June, it's gone through the hot phase, it started to sink again. I'll go out here some mornings and there's no chickens to be seen. So I call the chickens and they come up out of the tunnels in the ground. What were they doing tunneling in the compost? What were they doing in there? What were they eating? How about worms? So just by designing it this way, they get extra feed. They love to scratch. They get an extra, flies and bugs, whatever, from the rabbit manure. Any seeds or worms that come up with the weeds that we toss in, they're getting rid of the seeds in my weeds. They're shredding this material, they're mixing it with manure, and then they're putting it into the pile. They're turning my compost pile for me, and as a reward, they get extra feed. This compost pile, of course, then, is located right next to the garden. So here's these garden strips. We get these garden strips going this way. And every year, that little pit right there, it's about half a dump truck load of compost that they make for me, free of charge. And where does it go? Do I go all the way to the back, my big machine that's been turning these piles, and then move it all the way over to the back for you? I know, you just take it right out of here, right over in the garden right where it's needed. So I've come out here, done the cats and the dogs, the wild pollinators, taken care of business, fed the cows, the pigs, the chickens, the ducks, the turkeys, the guineas, collected my eggs, collected my mushrooms, thrown the compost over here, cleaned out from underneath the rabbit hutch, mixed all the manure with, shredded all the material, put it in the compost pile, turned the compost pile, then I walk through the garden, and I weed the garden by removing food plants and putting it in my basket. Oh, don't do that, you bum. Okay, so there we go. Whoop. So I've accomplished all this work. I go back to the house 15 minutes later. I've done all the chores, and I sit down to a breakfast to my certified organic eggs, shiitake mushrooms, and greens of the day in my nice home-raised, grass-fed chestnut and hazelnut and apple-finished bacon for breakfast. I think this is a little bit more functionally connected than that other guy. So then I have time for the rest of the day to goof off. I mean, work. Natural succession, I just want to briefly cover a little bit of this because it really does the aggradation. And then stacking and polycultures. If we were to start, this is a challenge I have out to somebody, anybody. Give me a rock in the center of Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, preferably Lake Superior, near Isle Royale National Park. Give me a rock in the middle of Lake Superior and I will farm that rock profitably. Okay? It's a heresy, right? We don't need soil. Soil is so irrelevant, it's not funny. Remember the story when you were a little kid that this guy put a willow stick in a pot of 170 pounds of soil, grew it for 5 years. The plant now weighed 175 pounds, and the pot only lost a pound. So what on earth was this plant made out of? Most of the plant's made out of cellulose, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Where did that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen come from? The air, the atmosphere. Everybody has seen trees growing out of the cliff, right? They don't need soil. Need. The rest is details. How soil is built, how sites aggrade the glacier leaves or whatever, and there's this bare rock. Lichens, this magical organism that's part fungus and part algae. The fungus starts to exude these acids that dissolve the rock, and the minerals now become bioavailable to the algae side of it. Their bodies decompose. Now there's extra carbon, starts to decay. There's now enough little bits of proto-soil for mosses to take root in. The mosses grow and start to die. Higher order plants can start to get established. Material blows in from somewhere else and starts to accumulate. The biodiversity is increasing. The soil fertility is increasing. The soil is actually being built, is being created. More plants can come in, some more woody plants, little shrubby things. The grasses are coming in, lots more imported material. It's more fertile, more nutritious, more life can actually be supported from this site. Now the grassland phase starts to happen, and this is when soil building really goes into high gears, when you start getting into the grassland phase, because they can pulse carbon. Their roots will grow, 2-3 feet deep. As the top grows 2-3 feet high, then you graze it off. The roots slough back. All this decomposition going on underground, and then the grazers bury it all with poop, and they urinate on the whole thing. That's where we really get our fast turnaround, and we can build soils fast, fast, fast. It's in the grassland phase with animals. Woody plants start to come in. This is all a natural process. This is taken on a picture on a lake way up north. You can see some larger woody plants starting to get established out there. I just put this in here to show you as we're going through the grasslands phase. It's not on the same rock. And then we have this system that you can see there's pieces of rock here. How much soil do you think is under there? Hardly anything, right? This little system here is pine on top of apple, on top of serviceberry, on top of hazelnut, on top of blueberry, with raspberry coming out from the edges, wild strawberries underneath, these little wild lingonberries, and the green grass grew all around, on the rock. Now, instead of growing white pine, why not grow something like a Korean pine, a pine nut pine? Wherever you live, there is a family of species that will live right on top of each other in the same place. So you put them in a single row. The short things will get the sun down here. The medium things will get the sun out here. The taller things get the sun here, and you're not going to take up hardly any space on your farm, and you got 7 different crops growing right in that one space. But select the varieties that are more adapted to your site, and that'll actually yield a crop. And how do we take care of these things? Stun, sheer total utter neglect. Yes, you can do things to them, and they may accelerate their growth. The jury is out and has been out for the past 10,000 years. Does any input actually increase your yields enough to pay your bills? Over the historical time, the answer is no. Input agriculture with annuals does not work. It just hasn't. So what you can do is you can start with a single row like this while you're growing out in the alleys here. And over time, add another row and another row and another row and just fatten your system up. This is what we've done on our farm. And since these are all rows of trees, not individual trees, you space these by your equipment. So you got, an alley going down here that you can mow, you can hay, you can graze, you can grow crops. Another alley here, all based on your equipment width. So that aerial photo that you saw of the farm, that's all based on the widths of my equipment, and all the polycultures are all grown single file in a row, just like that. Do some planning, but don't get all hung up on plans. This plan, I was on the team that developed this for an undisclosed nature preserve, and the plan was about 150 pages and it cost them $30,000. It broke their bank and they didn't implement it. This was the family plan that we put together when my kids were like 2 and 5. Sitting at the dinner table and scribbling with crayons, and after we got the basic plan down, I set them up with colors and let them color it in. So as you're a 2 and a 5-year-old just coloring things in, looking at this plan, don't you think they have it imprinted in them, how this thing is going to work and what it's going to look like over time? That exact system right there, they'll show you a picture of it later. Over time, over the 17 years that we've been there are now over 135 different perennial food plants out there. And whenever the kids got grumpy, it was like, they're hungry. All right, I'm cooking dinner, but getting grumpy, and I don't have time to deal with them because I'm cooking dinner. I was like, will you guys just go outside and eat? And they go outside and take care of it. And this is an example of what I call sustainable agriculture. This is the brush on the side of a road in central Wisconsin that in the mid-1800s, the Norwegian bachelor farmers showed up. They cut it all down. They pushed it in piles. They burned it. They split it up. They built it into cabins. They plowed it. Then all of a sudden they invented new technologies like brush hogs. They go by with the brush hogs. They do that for a few years. Road graders and scrape it all off. Then they invented the wet blade and they go through that big eater with a little bit of herbicide in it to kill everything as it goes. And as soon as these guys go by the brush on the side of the road, what happens to it? Comes back. Doesn't matter what they do to it. For 150 years, this roadside has been abused by human beings. And it comes back with this full, complete oak savanna family of species that I just explained earlier. And there's cherries, and the last time they did it, it was slightly after this. I stopped here to go out here looking for morels. I found like a tomato flat full of morels. Yeah, more money in a tomato flat worth of morels than an acre of corn. So, and this isn't something that they've been trying to kill for 150 years. All right, here's a challenge. Every one of you go home, and for the next 150 years, kill corn, okay? You don't even have to work that hard. One time through and it's gone, it's done. Doesn't matter how you're growing your corn, it's not sustainable. This is heresy. If you have to plant your crops again, that's not very sustainable, folks. Is it? After I took this picture, they went through and they brush hogged it with that wet blade and the herbicide, and then they bulldozed everything into a pile, and then they burnt it, and the wild plum just went nuts, just wild plum everywhere. So we want to integrate in addition to segregate. We want to create cycles. Nature recycles. Every raindrop that comes to my farm stays on my farm, and I want to recycle it, recycle it, recycle it, recycle it. Use it for productivity. Same with any kind of mineral nutrients. We have done inputs. We've brought in minerals onto the farm. We've brought biology onto the farm. But when it comes onto the farm, we want to keep it there and recycle it and recycle it. We don't want to create source to sink linear flows. And some examples here. This is our industrial system. It's a system that's in degradation. It's in a state of entropy. It's taking resources and making them less and less valuable, and it's concentrating the byproducts into toxins and wastes. So now, of course, we've got to make this efficient. So that means how much more effectively can we depopulate the world's fisheries? How much more coal can we extract, or how much natural gas can we frack out of every last piece of shale that we got? That's efficiency. That means how much more poison can we create? How fast can we do it? How many million-acre farms can we produce? How many zillions of birds can we put in these structures? This is an entropic system. It's a system that's in decline. It just is. And it's going to take more energy. It's taking more energy to keep the thing alive. Why not design something a lot similar to this? It's like my chicken coop. I think I'm going to show my chicken coop again. I doubled up on that picture by accident. My oldest son, Eric, showed me how to do this once, and it was really fun, him teaching me how to do this on the computer. I have no idea how to do this. We did it once, so a system more like this, integrated with the rest of the farm that actually produces work and our yields. We actually, this past year, as we started to do this on a small commercial scale, there's no reason in the world why we can't do this in like a commercial 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 egg flock. Really isn't. Let's use agroforestry techniques to create future yields while we're increasing our yields today. Get another drink of water here. If you're a cattle person, a sheep person, whatever, you're a grazer of some sort, you can get increased yields by adding to your ecosystem. If you're a rotational grazers, and trackers actually understand this the most. How many of you guys are rotational grazers? Okay, cool. You're going to hit carrying capacity. Can't have any more yields. That's all the grassland will support. Well, let's have your grassland and then add the savanna to it on top of it. University of Missouri Columbia has shown that you don't get decreasing yields when you implement agroforestry practices. You plant trees in your pasture, in rows. Polycultures like this, of course, is what I like to do with food-producing or income-yielding plants. You start to shade your pastures more. Your animals are less stressed. Think about this animal right here. Angus. Where does that name come from? It's Scotland, right. In Scotland, summertime high temperatures about 50 degrees American. It's gray and cloudy. And what on earth are we putting these black animals out in the Oklahoma blazing sun? This is insanity. And so everybody's seen it somewhere. There's that like one last tree that they never cut down, and all the animals hang out onto that one last tree, and they trample around it, turn it to mud, and eventually falls over. People say, oh, you can't have trees in your pasture. It'll kill all the goddamn trees. Well, if you have one tree in your pasture, that's where the shade is. They'll kill the tree. You want an even shade across your pasture, and your animals have less stress. They gain more. They'll graze more because they're not sitting underneath the shade of the tree trying to stay alive. The grass also grows faster, greens up earlier in the spring, stays green longer in the fall. The grass is more palatable. It stays photosynthesizing longer during the day. Photosynthesis only takes place during a narrow temperature band, and like above 75 degrees, it starts to slow down. So if you got grass way out in the open sun, and it gets hot during the middle of the day, it's going to slow down photosynthesis. It won't grow as fast. It's too hot. Also, what happens out in the full sun, a chloroplast is like a sponge. You got a kitchen sponge. If you pour water into a kitchen sponge, the sponge will soak up as much as it can, and then it runs off. If you get into this equilibrium where you're pouring water in and there's water running out of the sponge, that's like a chloroplast making photosynthetic products as fast as it can. It's taking as much sunlight as it can, making as much sugars as it can. Add more sunlight to it though, and it flows off. And when you get to that point, your chloroplasts it's called light saturation. It can't take any more light, it can't photosynthesize any faster. So in the full sun, they get light saturated quicker, and then when you add more sun to a light saturated plant, it turns into heat, so it raises the temperature, photosynthesis slows down yet again, and it eventually gets to the point where the plant just says, forget it, and it wilts. So in some places, seriously, like Kentucky Kentucky, like Oklahoma and Nebraska or Kansas where I've worked, there's places that probably don't even photosynthesize during the middle band of the day at all because the plants just shut down, it's too hot. So in even dappled shade, the plant will photosynthesize longer, it'll photosynthesize faster. The cattle will graze more, you'll get increased yields. The plant is more tender. Instead of having to protect itself with all this woody structure, it has the nitrogen, it's more digestible, more protein in it. You get increased yields when you have a complete dappled shade across your pasture. And if you've done it right, you're getting chestnuts and apples and hazelnuts and plums and grapes and currants and raspberries and mushrooms in the same system. That was how many different crops? 7, 8 additional crops, and your current system is doing better, not worse. And when you're doing your grazing, boy, you know, this mob stock grazing thing really excited me. I thought it was a really cool idea. But I got all these like skinny alleys between trees and stuff, and just a little nervous about that. And I usually partner with young folks who manage one part of the operation. It's like their commercial enterprise. And the past 3 summers, we've tried to do this mob stock thing. Well, the guy this summer actually did. And he actually went out there and spent the time and spent the time with the animals and got them to hang out in a mob. And when they would break out, sometimes you'll see them like this. They're not 8 cows. They're like a mob. Doesn't matter. And you'll see them everywhere like this. They go through, they graze more quickly because they got this jealousy thing going on. They see you eating fast. I better eat. More even shade, more palatable forage. Remember also we've done the water management, water control, so we've got more water available. The plants are able to grow faster, increased yields. This was the worst drought in Wisconsin history ever. Worst drought in Wisconsin history ever. We can't see it, but right up over there, there's a field that maybe they had 10, 20% of a yield on the soybeans that were across there. Our county and the county next to us were like the worst hit, big disaster area, all that kind of stuff. The cattle have never looked better. This was like in the middle of the drought, and the grass was fine. Yeah, we had to move things around pretty quickly, you know, because it was getting pretty slow growing after a while. One of the agroforestry practices, this is called silvopasture, when you're grazing your animals with trees, or planting trees in your pasture, not grazing your animals in the woods. We're talking putting trees in your pasture, or taking a bunch of trees that aren't really a forest, and they got all kinds of like invasives underneath it, letting in a little bit more light, letting the grasses regrow. We don't want to degrade healthy forests with this. So this is silvopasture. You can look up all these terms online. University of Missouri Columbia has most of the research on silvopasture system, grasses and semi-shade and yields and all that kind of stuff, and how much money you're going to save doing this. And another agroforestry technique. See, these are the bridge techniques that are taking us from the agriculture that we're doing today to this 3-dimensional perennial polyculture that will be our future. Because if we don't go to ecology as our method of agriculture, there won't be any future. Because nature is the only model that we have that has actually survived global warming, global cooling, volcanoes, floods, droughts. It's the only thing that survived with sheer total utter neglect. Nobody's ever spent anything on it. Nobody's ever done any inputs into that system. It takes care of itself. How we get there are these agroforestry techniques. Alley cropping is growing your regular crop in between rows of trees. One of the traditional ways to get apple orchard established or a chestnut orchard established, see we're orchards again, is you plant your trees in rows and now you take care of them. You input for 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 years with no yields. How stupid is that? Why not grow something in the alley and yield every single year? Well, why just yield in the alleys? Why not in the row have other things growing in the row? Just like this 3-dimensional polyculture going on. We want to have tall trees, medium trees, shrubs, canes, vines, shade tolerant, fungi, all growing in this row. And still, we got, believe it or not, I actually do grow some annual crops. Yay, hoorah. Winter squash, for example. An alley cropping system, hazelnut on either side. Somebody was asking earlier about spray and herbicide drift screens. Our whole farm, we have 25 feet surrounding us, at least 2 wide, sometimes 4 wide of hybrid poplar, hybrid willow, just these sacrificial trees that take a hit for the team whenever we get oversprayed. As far as like pollen drift is concerned, I'm not concerned about GMO pollen getting into my crops because I don't grow the same kind of crops that they do. How about growing your own fuel? Sunflowers for oil, you press the oil. The meal can then be used, it's a high protein feed for your livestock. I'm a part of a oil cartel, and there were 6 of us that got it all started, and combined we participated and pitched in money to get a mobile oil press on a trailer. And so we grow sunflowers. Some of the guys, the sunflowers, their oil is being sold to potato chip companies. And then this other guy in the cartel buys the oil from the potato chip company when they're done, brings it back, filters it, dewaters it, and then sells it back to us, and we use it in our tractors and our personal vehicles and delivery trucks. What's interesting about that whole thing, there's a lot of buzz about, oh yeah, you know, go downtown and get like a bucket of oil from the fryer later thing. Fuel, transportation fuel, is a huge industry. We can't fool around with, let's go pretend that we're doing something cool by getting a bucket of fry oil from the Chinese restaurant. That doesn't solve any problem at all. What we need to do is we need to set up cartels that if you're from, where are you from? I didn't even understand it. Harrisburg. I don't speak that language. Okay. I actually ate in Kentucky once. I sat down for a fish fry on Friday, and I looked at it and I said to the waitress, "Oh, I'll have catfish." And she goes, "Fiddly fly." I'm like, I don't speak Kentuckian that well. Fiddler or fillet, so whatever. You threw me off. That's cool. So what we need to do is we need to set up these cartels, these closed loop cycles, these circular systems, because we use fuels on a large scale. Let's produce fuel as a byproduct, not a byproduct, as a co-product. We're producing potato chips. How many potato chips and Cheetos are eaten these days? We're providing the fry oil for that. Well, then when the fry oil on the industrial scale, you ever see tankers going down the tank tracks saying like vegetable oil in it? You know, hundreds of millions of gallons of vegetable oil are being used every single day. Interrupt this stream, but you can't interrupt that stream with a 5-gallon bucket because I'm doing a cool thing. I'm a permaculture, so I'm going to put it in my Volkswagen. No, we need to set up another industry to intercept that waste stream and fuel our farms. And so now after the few years that this program's been in place, I think there's a dozen of us farmers that are participating in it. Most of us have converted all of our tractors and, like I said, our vehicles to it. And then the Organic Valley internal fleet that shuttles milk and cheese from plant to plant and butter and produce and all that kind of stuff all runs on vegetable oil. Not biodiesel. What a waste of energy. Let's spend energy to convert this perfectly usable oil into another kind of perfectly usable oil, and we lose some in that entropic process, lose some of that energy, and we get a byproduct of high protein feed concentrate for animals. Oh yeah, by the way, those sunflowers are being grown on the same acre as chestnuts. So we got an acre of chestnuts, an acre of sunflowers, an acre of green bell peppers, an acre of acorn squash, and some raspberries. All in the same acre. So I got 4 crops, 4 acres worth of crops in the same acre. This is a principle called over-yielding polycultures. Now, there are competitive interactions between these plants. Let's say I only get half a crop of chestnuts, half a crop of peppers, half a crop of sunflowers, and half a crop of acorn squash. I still have 2 whole crops coming off of 1 acre of ground. And the difference between this, some people say, oh yeah, that's great, good niche marketing idea. It's like, no, we're wholesale produce producers. We're shipping out pallet quantities of produce a week. We're not doing this on the small scale. We're not doing the farmer's market thing. This is putting it on the big truck and sending it down the road to feed the people in the city. These are large-scale staple food crops production methods. Oh, and I didn't mention the acre of asparagus. It's actually 2 acres of asparagus. Not on the same acre, but they overlap a little bit. And of course, after we take this off, who comes in to clean up the mess? Cattle and hogs. So we got the cattle and the hogs. So the ultimate cleanup crew. One of the things we always want to do, annual agriculture, like I said, is a degradation cycle. It's an entropic process. It's simplifying a perennial ecosystem, making it annual. And then when any kind of diversity wants to show up, it shoots it down even further. We use cultivation to get rid of weeds because we want nothing else to survive but our crop. Every time it tries to rear its head, we kill it because it's weeds. We're doing the opposite. We're on the aggradation side of the equation. We are here to restore ecosystem function. We're here to increase species diversity because we know that that's what also increases fertility naturally, effortlessly, without energy inputs, without money inputs. Every opportunity we get, we want to put as many species in as we can, encourage wild pollinators, encourage wildlife, insect-eating birds. And we also understand that change is the one thing that is constant. Things will always change on our farm. They're going to do 3 shots in a row here at the same place. I'm not going to be a corn farmer. You ask people, hey, what's going on? Oh, yeah, I'm a XYZ PDQ. And it's like I get stuck in this mode. I'm a wheat farmer. That's all I do. That's all I ever do. And we take for granted that the conditions are always going to be the same. Well, you go out, you do your soil test, you add this, you plant your wheat, go on vacation, come back, harvest your wheat. It's always the same, right? It's never the same. Nature is never the same. It's always throwing us curveballs. It's always going to change through time. Permaculturists and restoration agriculturists, we understand that, and we go with the flow and we work with it. This was originally a zucchini field. I wanted it to be chestnuts, and so we planted zucchini and chestnuts in an alley cropping system. I don't have pictures of the old days, but this used to be 5 rows of zucchini across here, and you couldn't even see the chestnut trees in the grass. Well, then a few years go by, we start to do fewer zucchinis because the chestnut trees are getting bigger. Then we eventually got down to we did like 3 rows of zucchini, then down to 1 row of zucchini. And once it's down to 1 row of zucchini, it's like, this is a real nuisance. It's really not worth the effort to go pick only 1 row of zucchini. The total yield off of this patch was not enough to justify all the effort to grow it. But I had been observing what's happening, and in the chestnut trees, we started to get weeds showing up. What kind of weeds showed up? Grapes, mulberries, raspberries, elderberries. If those are the plants that are naturally wanting to show up, should I go in there and clean up my orchard and get rid of my grapes and my raspberries and my mulberries and my elderberries? Nuh-uh. I'm taking the clue from nature, boom. So we planted all the middles with elderberries following that. And then over time, only like 3 or 4 years ago, once we started to get some shade conditions under the chestnut trees, then we start planting currants in the shade. So we've got chestnuts, elderberries, grapes, raspberries, mulberries, currants. And then I started doing products for medicinal herb company. We put irises in here for the iris root for skincare products. A few years later, elderberries, chestnuts in bloom. Very few Americans have ever seen chestnuts in bloom. There you go, count yourself among the few. And what are the yields coming off of here? Chestnuts, elderberries, cattle, hogs, grapes, mulberries, raspberries, iris roots, so 8 different crops. If I'm not getting 7 crops off a particular spot, I'm always thinking, how can I get 7? How can I get 7? Why 7? I don't know. Pretty cool number. And I got my buddies out there. And so we go online and search for chestnut fattened hog or chestnut fattened pork. Guess what? Can't find it. Can't find it. I produce the only stuff in the country that I know of. Since I'm the only producer of this kind of product, do you think that I can charge a little bit more than $1.29 a pound? So then I say to the customers, okay, I'm not gonna charge you, what I really should get for it, but go online now and look for hazelnut fattened pork, and you can find that. And probably the lowest price you'll find is about $14 a pound. So I can say to my customers, hey customers, help me out here. I want to help you, you help me, I'll even cut you a deal. It doesn't even have to be $14 a pound for you. I'll get them a little bit more than $1.29 a pound, okay? That's just the short and short of it. Now, some things is, the input agricultural system is what creates the problems of your next problems you have to deal with. One of the things that's really interesting, apples really don't like to have their roots in dense sod. And so conventional growers will use herbicide, organic growers will use mulch or tillage. Mulch, tillage, herbicide are all inputs, right? Inputs are expenses in money and or time or labor, if nothing else, because many of us don't even pay ourselves. Whenever there's something that's an expense or an expense or an expense, think to yourself, how can I turn this into a profit? And if you can't figure out how to turn it into a profit, it's because you haven't figured long enough. Any kind of expense that you have now, how do I turn that into a profit? And as I mentioned earlier about the person taking their seeds and throw them out into the pasture, if you got a $10,000 loss, you'll be financially better off if you do nothing. Okay? So how do we get rid of our sod? Instead of doing an input, why not get a yield? These plants, we've got comfrey, daffodils, and irises. All of those will outcompete the sod naturally. They'll outfight the sod, the grasses will die, and the daffodils will bloom 3 weeks before the apples do. So where do all the wild pollinators go to get their nectar in the spring? My apple orchard. And then 3 weeks later, how long does it take for a bee to raise its next generation? 21 days. Pretty cool. It's almost like this place was designed that way. And then all of a sudden, when the apples bloom, I've got a second generation already of wild pollinators out there. No need for honeybees, although we do have honeybees. Iris roots sold to a medicinal herb company. Comfrey green sold to a medicinal herb company. University of Madison research shows that the #1 overwintering habitat for beneficial insects is underneath comfrey leaf debris. They found more overwintering, beneficial insects under comfrey leaf debris than anything else. This guy, a cabbage grower, Menno Lambright in Hillsboro, Wisconsin, was the guy who supplied that data. He just had beneficials off the charts. Also, another benefit of having the daffodils at the base of your trees, they're toxic to rodents. So now you don't have rodents coming in and nibbling the bark off your trees. All these yields are accomplishing work. Instead of being expenses to accomplish work, we have yields accomplishing work. Then let's take pest or disease control. Apple scab is one of the biggest fungal disease in apples. Apple scab, the spores infect the leaves, they fall to the ground. The next spring, when a raindrop hits it at the right temperature, the spores release and they go up and they hit the lower foliage of the apple tree, and then they continue to climb up just like smoke or fire rising up through the tree. We have this natural pruning process where most of our apple trees are pruned, no branches, up to about 4 or 5 feet. And that natural pruning agent is called deer. And they will remove all the branches for you. You don't even have to pay them. No workman's comp, no nothing. So what happens now is any leaves that fall with apple scab, when the raindrop hits it, if it splashes up, it might fall down and never quite hit a leaf of your apple to go up. So there's one little disease control. Well then, what do organic growers or chemical growers spray to get rid of this fungal disease? A fungicide, right? What does a fungicide kill? Fungus. You're right there, this brilliant guy. Maybe you will have a bowel movement today. That's good. You're on up and up. Why on earth is spraying of fungicides an input, isn't it? It's an expense. So whether you're conventional, chemical, or organic, you've already, in an orchard, they've already have the expense of weed control, or grass sod control underneath the apple trees, where I have income, and weed control, grass control. Then they spray for fungicides. I've got the deer helping me on one hand, but even if the deer weren't helping me, why would I want to spray fungicide in my apple orchard when fungicides kill fungus? Anybody seen it yet? Why on earth would I want to spray fungicides of any kind in my apple orchard? Here's another yield just because I'm not doing. Remember how I was saying that not doing is a very cost-effective method? You get other benefits by not doing. Other things show up in a healthy system. Another method of scab control, in the fall after the leaves have fallen, cattle move through. In the fall, we mow before the apple's got to be harvested, and then the grass isn't growing that fast, so then our pickers go through and harvest. We let 50% of the apples fall off the tree. Those are the ones with bugs in it. They fall to the ground. Then we go out and pick. And instead of having a packing shed with a grading line where people grade the apples, how about grading them out in the field as a human being picking them off the tree? If there's bugs on it, you throw it on the ground. If it's good, it goes in the basket. Later on, when we're making cider, any perfect fruit we can pull out and put in the cooler for perfect fruit sales. The rest we squish it. As they're going through, they throw all these apples that are on the ground. The cattle go through, they graze the grass. They also eat a lot of the apple leaves as they're going through. And then the pigs go through and they eat the fruit that's on the ground that has all the worms in it. So we've got this pest control going on because we're turning worms, pests, into pork. My favorite form of pest control in the orchard is pork chops. I really, really like that. And yeah, right. It's over and over again, and this happens to me over and over again. Yeah, but you just won't get the yields that way. Don't tell these guys, okay? And how important is a yield? Does it matter if you get 100 bushels an acre of name that crop if you're losing $10,000 a year? What if I only get, all right, say instead of 5 bushels apples per apple tree, what if I only get 1 bushel apples per apple tree? Me and the other orchardists, we only share one cost, and that's pre-harvest, prep, and harvest. That's the only cost we share. All the other inputs that they have, I've replaced their inputs with incomes. Even if I wasn't getting that income, if I only get 1 bushel of fruit per tree, That's pure profit, right? Say I sell it for 10 bucks. I get $9 profit out of that one bushel of fruit because I did nothing to it. If he's spending $40 in cash to produce a $10 box of fruit, he's losing 30 bucks a bushel. Why do you want to increase your yields? Einstein said that doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results is called insanity. All right? Yeah, don't tell these guys that you can't get yields this way. This system that you see right there, that we established, a restoration agricultural system that's developed in your area with your species and your plants, will increase yields and fertility with decreasing costs for millennia. Seriously, this is what the system does. This is how nature works. And if I walk away from my farm, it's going to still be productive forever because we've set up an ecological process. What's really cool is my plants are starting to take over the neighbors. Every time these corn farmers kind of turn around, they can't get into that corner. The corners of my neighbors' farms are starting to have these perennial polycultures spring up that I didn't plant. A blue jay comes and grabs a hazelnut, drops it, or chestnut or raspberry, whatever. They're starting to pop up here and there. What if we become the next invasive species? What if we invade the annual crop fields of this world with perennial polyculture food systems that produce more calories per acre than corn, and the nutrition per acre can't even compare, not even compare. This is like our kitchen garden. Anybody ever have a garden before? Yeah. Anybody ever pull weeds? Yeah. Anybody ever win? Forget it. It's like fighting against gravity. There are invisible forces at work here in the universe, one of which is succession. Every time you plow or cultivate, what you're doing is you're disturbing the system and you're setting succession back. As soon as you let go of your controls, it's going to come back in and take over. So why not design our system to go in line with those invisible forces of succession, set it up, all of the forces that all these other farmers are fighting against, buying all these equipment and materials and inputs to fight against, they're now working for me because I've lined my whole system up with the natural successional forces and it takes care of itself. Look at all the flowers. Someone was saying, yeah, but you don't have any flowering plants. You haven't planted any honey plants in your system. It's like, I don't have to. You don't have to. They show up. Apple orchard. I would like somebody in the front row to go up there and point to the apple tree. Guess what? Pests can't find it either. They're like this airplane coming in the fog, and they've got their radar on. They're looking for the runway somewhere, and they see this little tiny scratch on the screen. It's like, well, maybe that could be the runway. They say, screw that. I'm turning around and I'm going to go find the organic apple orchard with it's nothing but apples. I took this picture this very day. I was walking through here. I saw this phenomenon. I ran to the house, got my camera, and came back, and they were gone, but I took the picture anyways. Up here was a eastern kingbird. They go out and up and catch bugs. They go down here and catch bugs. Down here was an eastern phoebe. They go out and up and catch bugs. They go down. Sometimes they bounce off the ground and catch bugs. Over here was a bluebird. Bluebirds are pounce hunters. They love to pounce on the ground and catch bugs. 3 dimensions of bug control. Then there's a phenomena that I still haven't been able to stop my reaction to. But I'll drive along my tractor doing whatever, and all of a sudden there's, those little gooey, sticky things that kids have that go out and they stick to something and they slime back? I'll be kind of driving along, and all of a sudden, like, this thing hits my neck. It's like, and it's a tree frog. Tree frogs all through the system. There's no surface water around our farm for 1.5 miles. They come to all of our, we've created this microclimate environment that the amphibians really, really love. There are 7 different kinds of amphibians on our farm, including toads, which, believe it or not, are the only amphibian known to eat plum curculio, which is one of the biggest apple pests. And amphibians get 50 to 60% of their oxygen right through their skin. Why on earth would I spray any kind of poison, chemical or organic, for pest control when it's going to make my pest control operators sick? My amphibian's going to be sitting there and taking Ryannia or whatever pest control or neem and go like, oh man, and throw up all over the place, maybe starve to death. They're slow long enough so a bird picks them off. Why would I be doing pest control when it's killing my pest control? So now this poor little codling moth has laid an egg there. They're smart. They don't lay all their eggs on one tree. They go looking for another one. They're toast. Can't find it. Where's the next one? So on. This is a hostile environment for pests. It's a deeply diverse, balanced ecosystem. We spray nothing. Okay, let's do a little math here. A system like this has 3 to 7 times the energy capture per acre. I don't have to get 300 bushel an acre corn in my system if I'm going to grow corn, because I got 3 to 7 times different energy potential. I can be using different crops. I got different times of the year that I'm harvesting and different ways of processing waste into another yield. You improve the resource base. Give me that rock in Lake Superior. I saw some guy grin. You must have an island up in Lake Superior somewhere. Let's talk afterwards. It's perennial. It reproduces itself. Nursery stock. Scion wood for grafting is another enterprise that you have. When I go in to prune the apple orchard, I'm subsidizing my work by selling sticks to other people. I'm doing tree breeding all the time. Like I said, it's just like breeding a herd of animals. We want to be breeding our herds of trees. Finally, produce growers are thinking about saving seed and breeding their own varieties. It's no different with trees. The Macintosh apple has not evolved since 1839. Do you think the world is a different place than it was in 1839? Yeah, it doesn't perform the way it did back then. In 1839, how many sprays did they have for pest and disease control? I bet you the Macintosh apple was about as pest and disease free as you could get in 1839. Nowadays, it's a wimp. Everything loves it and attacks it all over the place. We need our new varieties. We need to be planting our 1,000 apple seeds a year. What if we started in 6th grade? Every kid plants an apple seed in their repurposed milk carton, and then they grow it. By the time all these millions of kids all through the country have planted these apple seeds, by the time they hit high school, how many hundreds of different apple varieties that are perfectly pest and disease free, that grow on the soil that's adapted right here with no mineral amendments whatsoever, no biological amendments whatsoever, no pest control, no disease control. How many varieties do you think we could produce? Millions, millions, but we have this concept, oh, therefore don't say to your seeds. It's perennial, reproduces itself. Nursery stock is a great secondary business. No plowing, cultivating, pest or disease control ever again once you're established. It's year-round harvest. I start harvesting in February. I finish harvesting in November when all the livestock goes to sleep. There's no erosion, non-toxic, and I think it's beautiful. If you don't think it's beautiful, you can put some plastic mulch or the plastic edging around it and then bury it with the pink painted mulch, and that's fine. If you live in a suburban environment, you may be required to do that. That's okay. Same system will work. This is only like 50 by 50 foot triangle. One year, a nonprofit organization in our neck of the woods measured the agricultural yields off of this 50 by 50 foot triangle. We had $300 worth of products that year on a 50 by 50 foot triangle. What were my expenses in producing those $300 worth of products? Zero. Beat that, beat zero expenses for production costs, okay? That's working with nature. Everything else is fighting against it. This is the other option. Let's all go home and let's go and farm with only 7 times less energy capture per acre. You guys aren't even working with a full deck of cards if this is what you're doing. You're trying to play poker against me? I got 2 decks, 3 decks, 5 decks, 7 decks of cards. Let's see who can throw an ace down first. You only got 1 card. Oh, sorry, man, it's a 2. 2 of clubs. Degrading resource, fact. There would be no agricultural input industry if we didn't need agricultural inputs. We need agricultural inputs because our type of agriculture is degrading the resource base, period. Fact. There's plowing, herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, fertilizers, year after year after. Did you hear they're going to be planting corn again next year? Thought they already did that. There's one crop, one market, total risk exposure. 2008, I don't know if you guys remember, there were like bread riots around the world, because the prices were going through the roof and all that kind of stuff. It's like, wow, we must have almost ran out of wheat because, there was shortages everywhere. Well, 2008 happened to be the planet's highest wheat yields ever in history. It's like, wait a minute, whoa. This is the invisible hand of the market. We have more product than ever before. The price should have been cheaper than ever, right? Well, no, because somebody in a little suit and tie and a white shirt was sitting at a computer working for his boss man for like about a year and ahead, buying up all these future contracts for the wheat. And it's a major multinational corporation that they didn't corner it, but they took like 2/3 of the market of wheat they controlled. And you didn't get your wheat unless you paid their price. So the price of wheat went through the roof with the largest crop ever. This is not a free market economy, whether they say it is or not. You're totally, the farmers didn't do anything wrong. Did they get paid the highest prices ever? Of course not. No, they didn't. They got paid the worst prices ever because it was the highest yield ever. So you get paid less than anybody else. Well, now when it gets to market, it's the most expensive. Who made the money? We have degraded landscapes, small towns, cultures. Any of you guys in rural areas, you know about these little small towns that just don't have anything going on anymore. Once they drop below a certain population threshold, they're no longer viable anymore. People move to the city. At least I got a job. At least I'm creating this big wall to protect us against bad guys that are coming after us. And then when I'm done, at least my hair and my bones will go to good use in a wall. Where does this lead? Always, 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 every single time that a culture has depended on annual crops for its carbohydrates, proteins, and oils, it has ended in collapse. In case you hadn't realized this, I'm a student of collapse research. All these different civilizations around the world. It's fascinating to go through the same cycle over and over and over again. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Well, the idiots who said that were doomed to repeat it anyway, so I don't know if we study it or not, it makes any difference. Anyhow, at the end of a civilizational time period, phase, remember, of course, this city was built in the most fertile, most rich, most luxuriantly abundant place that there was, because they can get top yields for their crops. They get transportation because of their waterways, plenty of irrigation water, plenty of timber for all of the war machines that they need. And of course, these guys were either A, divinely appointed by God, B, elected by the people, C, meaner, more ruthless, more socialist, or more Marxist, or whatever. It didn't matter. All different kinds of political systems have come and gone this way. At the end times, these guys start blaming these people. Say, hey, come on, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Let's go. Let's turn this thing around. And they said, hey, will you like trickle down something besides, urine coming out of your cesspool here? Let us have some of this golden jewels that you guys are having up there. So they start to get these people to fight with each other. And then these guys blame these guys, and then they can't agree, they can't get along with each other, and these guys go, ha, we got them now, they're our subjects, whatever, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. Then they have to make bigger gates, longer driveways, more security, more military. This happens over and over and over again before it finally falls apart. The real thing is they degraded their resource base to the point where it could no longer support the complexity of their society. Our culture has degraded our resource base to the point where it can no longer support the complexity of our society. You can choose to do that when you go home, all right? I'm not going to. I am so committed to this that I spent the last 17, 18, 20 years of my life racking my brains and trying to figure out how to do this and writing a stupid book about what I'm talking about here. I'm actually reminded of a Wendell Berry story. If you've ever read this story, Fidelity, this farm family, independent farm family, small markets, they're a totally connected, closed-loop system. Grandpa starts getting sick and old. They decide what to do. Well, let's take him to the hospital just for a checkup. They go to the hospital. He's got this, 1,000 things wrong with him. They check him in. He's now on tubes and needles. And every time they go in here, Grandpa opens his eyes, and they see out of his eyes this please get me out of here. Please get me out of here. So finally one night, the oldest son doesn't tell anybody. He goes down to the hospital and he takes all the tubes and everything out of Grandpa, picks up his grandpa and gets the heck out of there, and they go out to the back 40 and hide in the tobacco shed. He knows Grandpa's dying, but Grandpa wants to be with his family, with his loved ones, and to live this private, independent life, the rich, luxurious, abundant life they've always had. So the son goes out and starts digging a hole in the ground. And Grandpa wakes up every once in a while. He's got this moment of lucidity, looks around. Man, we're in deer camp. He's like, hey, I got the fire going. Did you see anything out? Oh, yep, I was scouting over here. He wipes the sweat off him from digging the hole. And we went over this way, whatever. So they sit down, they have a cup of coffee, fries up some bacon. Before they cook the bacon, Grandpa's out again. Goes back to digging, back and forth, back and forth. Every time he comes, Grandpa's got this lucidity, this joy, the tears of just exuberance. He's home, he's free, he's happy. Grandpa eventually dies. They bury him. The sheriff is like, somebody kidnapped. We got you on video. You've kidnapped your grandfather. He says, look, I just checked him out. We can check him out anytime we want. We're free people. You murdered your father, father, blah, 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 blah. The sheriff knows what these guys did. And these guys know that the sheriff knows what they did. And the oldest son says, look, I am not one of you people. I am not a part of your system, and I will not participate. We are going to take care of our own, and we're going to do it our way, and we're going to change the world. I am not a part of this system. I refuse to be a part of the system that's destroying the planet that I live on. We can do that, okay? Or we can do something like this. And this is where I'm going. Your life is the only life that you have any modest amount of control over. So put it to good use. Let's do something real. Let's make some oxygen. Let's make some clean water, food, shelter, beauty. We are responsible as human beings for creating our own habitat and our own future of abundance for our children. Because if we don't, who the hell will? Okay? There ain't nobody else out there making any more nature for us. My father, when he was a 20-year-old kid, was able to go up and down the coast of California, and every single stream in California had wild salmon that you could almost walk across. In one lifetime, there are 0 wild salmon runs on the west coast of the USA. They're all hatchery raised and hatchery fed. There are no more wild salmon on the west coast of America. What the hell have we done to this whole planet fast? How many toxic wastelands are there? How many Louisville, Kentuckys have places where there's people living in the streets, dying with cancerous growths, and they're told to get picked up by their bootstraps? Give me a break. You got me going again. What we want to do, what is it that we're creating here, okay? I'm not a sustainable farmer, and I'm out to create this notion, this concept of what I think a sustainable farm is if it drives me bankrupt. I'm here to change the whole entire system to create something entirely new that's now aggrading the resource base, creating the abundance of the future. So if that's what we want to create, now we sit down and make a plan. This is what it takes. I'm going to create a farm that is perennial, lasts 1,000 years, produces its own energy, and sells the surplus to whoever needs it in the forms of fuel and electricity. We just design that. So, okay, this is what we're going to do. And like I said earlier, if we plan for anything less than Eden, we'll get it, right? We'll get less than Eden, and we'll wonder why. It's because we didn't plan for all of it, the whole ball of wax. One of the things... Base your farm on actual reality, not virtual reality. Go out in the real world. Yes, read your books. Yes, learn what you can, and have a big BS meter to filter out the stuff and what is the real observation and what's just merely a concept. We want this to be based in reality. And then become uncomfortable with mystery and the fact that human beings are really pretty clueless. If we were all that smart, why did it take us 5,000 years to put wheels on our luggage? Okay? Accept feedback. There are no mistakes. We do something and we don't get the results we want. This is holistic management right here. Assume that we're wrong. We know we're wrong. We've always been wrong. So let's do this management practice that we hope to accomplish this. Oops, we didn't accomplish this. Instead of beating yourself up, say I'm bad, I'm lousy, I'm miserable, I need some Prozac, say, well, let's do this. And keep modifying. Have the system in place to accept the feedback, change your management practice, and go forward. No mistakes, only feedback, redesign, and keep going. This is not a thing. This is not a project. It's not something that you do once. This is a process that we are now involved in forever. And as Acres USA participants, all of you guys deserve a huge round of applause because you are the most innovative, out there thinkers in agriculture today. And if you guys can't pull it off, nobody else can. And I'm here to tell you that you probably can. You probably can. Start with where you are today, one step at a time, always, forever. This is where we're going. So we have a lot of work for us. Like I said, with succession and gravity and light and heat. Anybody ever see the movie Zoolander? It was like these male models, and they all had like this special pose with a name. This is what we call blue steel. And there are invisible forces in this universe that are more powerful than the things that we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. We can't measure this with machines, with tests, with devices, but we know it's there and we know it's real. The most incredibly powerful, undefeatable force in the universe is on our side, okay? And that's the force of love. And you know it's real because you can see it there. You can see it in her, in him, in you, in you. I see it in all of you guys. And I'm not talking about the love like, oh, that's nice, I love you. I'm talking about the screaming anguish of a woman in childbirth, a tiger protecting her kids. This is a lightning strike to the middle of the forehead, a flaming sword down your throat. This is the awesome ripping power of the entire frickin' universe coming boom onto the planet for the next phase. This is love. Okay? Come on, there we go. And the eyes of the future are looking back on us. They are looking back on us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our time. They are praying with all their might that we turn this thing around. And I hereby hold every single one of you responsible to turn this around one step at a time. One plant at a time, one tree at a time, one hand held at a time, one hug given at a time, one kick in the ass given at a time when someone needs it. Let's turn this thing around. Okay. Okay. Now, it's supposed to be at noon. I'll be out at the book table signing copies of the book. When I've been signing copies of the book, I've been putting little phrases in it that are part of a song that I wrote. The song that I wrote was inspired by a couple of different things, and I have enough time to sing it. And if I can stop wobbling enough, I will try to sing it. And let me do this way. Some of you will probably recognize where this comes from. Can you guys hear that in the mic? No one's nervous up here, right? Let's start that one over. Stop the mic and all that kind of. May you be just like a tree planted by streams of water. May you bear good fruit in your time. May your leaves spring always green. May your leaves spring always green. Lift up your heart to the wide open sky. Let the wind blow through your leaves. Grow wrinkled and old as to this rock you hold, with gratitude for every gentle breeze. With gratitude for every gentle breeze. Now this is the chorus where everybody takes their cell phones and does this back and forth. Stand tall and proud, bend with the wind, withstand the tests of time. Sink your roots deep into the earth, raise your branches, face the sun. Raise your branches, face the sun. Soothe me with your smile, warm me with your good. Whisper my name, like a lover would. Standing on the rock, stand tall and proud, bend with the wind, withstand the tests of time. Sink your roots deep into the earth, raise your branches, face the sun. Raise your branches, face the sun. Soothe me with your smile, warm me with your good. Whisper my name, like a lover would. Standing on the rock,